Stillman Company is delivered by TriStar Moving, ESPN 1025. The Game. Caroline Fenton is here. Hello, Caroline.
Hello. Happy Wednesday.
Happy Wednesday. Ian is here. Hello, Ian.
Hello.
So let me say this time of the year, and I'm talking about in a normal year, which was so long ago it's like hard to remember normal years, but 2019 was a normal year. Once the Predators are out of the playoffs and the NFL draft is over and OTAs are essentially finished, there's really not a lot normally to do on the radio consistently. Now, this year is different, and I think we do a pretty good job of the summer radio. Some guys will get up there and just complain about it, but I used to joke with Floyd. I used to say, you know what, once the Predators and the Titans, once the draft's over and the Predators get knocked out, we might as well just take vacations for 2 months and then come back at the start of training camp. There is so much going on right now. I mean, there is so much. You got the Titans. Like today, the Titans offensive coordinator and defensive coordinator spoke to the media for the first time since becoming offensive coordinator and becoming defensive coordinator. And that's maybe 13th on the list of things today. I mean, we've got a ton of the Predators players talk today. A lot of interesting things not said by the Predators players, which we'll touch on. We got college baseball. Vandy and Tennessee are two of the top 4 teams in the country. And we've got Julio Jones. And that's where I want to start today. I am not somebody who believes just because what happened last time happened that it will necessarily happen this time. I'm not a huge believer in that. I also am a guy who believes that they are purely in the opinion business. Now, I will do some reporting. I hear things that maybe you don't hear. Certain people tell me certain things, and most of the time it's because, well, I hate to tell on myself, but I kind of have a big mouth, and sometimes when you tell me something, it just comes out. Not one of my favorite things about myself, but it's true. But for the most part, I'm in the opinion business. This is my opinion. This is why I have it. This is where we're going. Okay. And as I said, just because this is what happened last time doesn't mean it's what will happen next time. Just because the last time Vanderbilt hired a defensive coach in Derek Mason, it didn't work out, doesn't mean that this time hiring a defensive coach, Clark Lee, it won't work out. But today I think it hit me. I was watching ESPN and they were talking about Julio Jones. And there is one team, and this has been a discussion for 3 to 5 weeks on ESPN about Julio Jones and where he's going to go. Star player, first ballot Hall of Famer, hitting the market, maybe a little gas in the tank. Let's see. And there's one team that hasn't gone away the entire discussion. We've heard the Ravens and the Niners and the Patriots and the Rams and the Seahawks, and he was wearing a Dallas sweatshirt at one point. Remember that? But there's one team that won't go away, and it's the Titans. Let me say this. When I tell you what I'm about to tell you, it does not mean that I think the Titans should acquire Julio Jones. I have been on record with my opinion, having told you all that I don't think they should sign Julio Jones. I don't want them to trade for Julio Jones. I don't want them to trade the pick to Atlanta. I don't want to take on that kind of salary. And at the end of the day, I still think Julio is old, he is hurt, and he is expensive. Is he a good player? Yes. Is he anything near the player he was 5 years ago? Not so much. He'll help, but not at $15 million and not if I have to trade a second-round pick. That's my belief. My other belief, though, is I think the Titans are going to trade for Julio Jones. I have no sourcing on this. This is not a what I'm hearing. This is after all the tea leaves that I have been reading for the last 2 weeks. I think it's now at a point where enough is enough, and you just have to be honest with yourself. This feels like one big, long charade between the Titans on one side and Atlanta/Julio on the other. It seems as if we keep hearing conflicting reports. Atlanta's got a first-round pick they're being offered. Atlanta's only going to get a third or a fourth-round pick. Atlanta can't trade all that salary. Atlanta can't. And yet, we don't hear about the Cowboys in the mix. We don't hear about any teams that you would say Philadelphia, the big markets. Chicago has a new quarterback. Don't hear about them. We don't hear about anybody else except for the Titans, and then they'll throw some other teams in there. But it's the Titans, the Titans, the Titans, the Titans. Kimberly Martin, to this morning on ESPN, the insider, said what she's hearing as the latest on Julio. And think about the teams that we've heard connected at one point or another, like the Ravens and the Rams. Here's what Kimberly Martin said.
The sticking point really is the compensation, the age, and the health of this player. A lot of teams would like to add him, but how much are you going to give up? I actually found out that the Ravens and the Rams, two teams that make sense on paper, you can cross them off the list of potential landing spots. So, execs that I talk to around the league are skeptical that the Falcons are going to be able to get a 2022 first-round pick. In fact, a GM I spoke to last night said he would give up a third for Julio Jones.
Okay, we were skeptical on this show that they were going to get a first-round pick. They were skeptical last week before the Diana Rossini report about a first-round pick came out that they were going to get a first-round pick. And now they're skeptical that Atlanta's going to get a first-round pick today. And you heard what she said. The GM she talked to offered a third. Caroline Fenton yesterday put together the offer that the Titans, if she were running the Titans, she would give for Julio Jones. Caroline, what was the hallmark of your offer?
2022 third.
A third. It's pretty simple to me. It feels like it's the Titans and it's Atlanta. And Tennessee has set their price on what they're willing to pay, and Atlanta is just trying to get them to move. It reminds me a lot of the Jadeveon Clowney situation last year. In fact, on this date a year ago, Diana Rossini reported on ESPN that the Browns had offered Clowney a bunch of money, and he turned it down. Really? Does anybody believe that? She said at the time, Philadelphia, Seattle maybe, Tennessee, Cleveland. Just like with Clowney, the Titans are the one team in the discussion that never goes away as far as Julio's concerned. We heard about the Patriots. How long did we hear about the Patriots for? A week? We don't hear about the Patriots anymore. We heard about the Rams this week. What about the Rams? Kimberly Martin said, scratch them off. The Ravens, scratch them off. San Francisco, the one team we hear about consistently is the Titans. In fact, Kimberly Martin on ESPN this morning said the team we hear the most connected to Julio Jones is who?
Tennessee is a team that comes up in a lot of my conversations with executives, but any head coach will tell you this: you're playing with fire with Julio Jones. So you got to be sure that your team is literally just a Julio Jones away from making a lot of noise in the playoffs. Because if not, you're investing a lot of money in a guy who's 32.
And I think that's why the Titans are not budging off of their price. I think the Titans have told Atlanta, and again, I'm not reporting. This is my opinion. I think the Titans have told Atlanta, we want Julio, here are the terms. I think now Atlanta is trying to get somebody else into the discussion, somebody that will take on more money, somebody that might give them a better pick, and the Titans, just like they did with Clowney last year, just like they did with DeMarco Murray when they signed him or traded for him with Philadelphia and had him take a different deal, and they did it on their terms, the Titans are sitting back and waiting. And as much as I disagree with some of the things John Robinson has done as general manager, though I do think he's done a good job, 5 winning seasons in 5 seasons as a general manager is usually pretty good, I think this is one of his better suits, and that is willing to play the waiting game. If you've ever watched a documentary or heard a speech from Warren Buffett, you'll know that's how he makes big acquisitions. I think that, again, I am just reading the tea leaves. I think it seems apparent to me that there's one team that wants Julio Jones. Well, I think there's probably a lot of teams that want Julio Jones, but there's one team in the Julio sweepstakes that's not going away, and it's the Titans. And I don't think the Titans are upping their offer. So yesterday when Mike Tannenbaum threw out the suggestion, maybe just tell all the teams right now I want your final offer, maybe Atlanta is weary of doing that. Because if they do, maybe they won't get a good final offer. By the way, Jeff Schultz, a longtime Atlanta columnist, is with The Athletic now, said last week on Robbie and Rex Road, you can't send Julio somewhere he doesn't want to go. And he also reiterated that he thinks Julio wants to come here. So again, I don't think the Titans are going to overpay. I think a third-round pick, and I think Atlanta's going to eat a lot of money. But I think the Titans are going to end up with Julio Jones. I just don't see much movement. I hear teams in and out and in and out, and I've heard a first-round picks on the table. We also heard that Clowney turned down $17 million from Cleveland last year. I asked the question, does anybody actually believe that? Especially when he signed for $12.5. When Tennessee gives up a third-round pick and Atlanta eats $8 million of Julio Jones' salary this year, will anybody believe that they actually got offered a first-round pick? I could be completely wrong, and I have no sourcing on this. I have talked to no general managers, but it just feels like the Clowney situation last year. There's a market, kinda, but it seems to be revolving around the Titans. So this morning, after hearing the Rams, who, by the way, have no picks, are out, after hearing San Francisco, who, by the way, has no picks, after hearing they're out, after hearing the Ravens, who spent a first-round pick 2 years ago on a number one wide receiver, Hollywood Brown, he has not become that, and spent a first-round draft pick this year on a number one wide receiver, Rashad Bateman, they're out. Knowing Bill Belichick is not going to sell the farm to get a 32-year-old injured, expensive superstar, I think all the Titan fans that desperately want Julio are ultimately going to get their wish. It may just take some time. But again, in a humongous news day where there's a lot going on, I felt strongly about the fact that I think Julio Jones is going to the Titans. I wouldn't do it. I'm against it. But I think it's going to happen, and I think it's going to happen on their terms. 615-737-1025 is our phone number. 615-737-1025. Remember, ESPN, they love talking about the Cowboys. They love talking about the Patriots, the Packers, the Steelers. They love talking about those teams. They don't like talking about the Titans. We know that. And yet this morning, the first block of Get Up on ESPN was about the Titans. Because I think they believe, we already played the Kimberly Martin clip, they believe the Titans are probably the favorites for Julio Jones. Though I did see the betting favorite is Seattle. I don't hear their name that much other than Seattle would like to, but the Titans are the one name that will not go away. And again, you know I'm objective with this because I don't want Julio Jones on the Titans. 615-737-1025 is our phone number, 615-737-1025. ESPN also this morning had some pretty strong takes about what if the Titans do pull the trigger on Julio Jones. Are we believing it? Are we buying it or selling it? We'll discuss next. We're live from the wholesaling studio, powered by RumbleOn.com, Stillman Company. We're delivered by TriStar Moving. It's ESPN 1025, The Game. Hey, Todd, a question for you. There's a lot of speculation about potential additions perhaps the offense could make, but as is currently constructed, do you feel comfortable that this offense, the talent on it, is good enough?
Yeah, I'm excited again about the competition we have at the different spots on offense, and my job is to coach the guys that are here, and I'm doing that to the best of my ability each day, and I think that you're going to see some growth from some of these guys competing. And excited to see where they finish up by the time we get to the real ball.
Todd Downing, the Titans offensive coordinator. Listen to him talk today. Boy, he is Mike Vrabel's offensive coordinator if there ever was one. He says absolutely nothing, which is exactly what Mike Vrabel wants. I thought he was, when I listened to him talk, I go, man, this guy, he is made for Mike Vrabel.
He's been coached by Mike Vrabel for sure. He has been
made for Mike Vrabel. So I said today, I think Julio Jones is going to the Titans. I do. I think it's the one team name that never goes away in all of this. People talk about betting odds, and I would be one to tell you that a betting market doesn't actually represent anything close to what's going to happen. A betting market is essentially just pure speculation. That's why we went over the fact that the Dallas Cowboys over-unders are every year inflated in Vegas because people want the Cowboys to be good. Like, there is a certain percentage of the country that wants the Cowboys to be good. So they go and they bet the over on the Cowboys. Well, once you keep betting the over on the Cowboys, then it raises the win total up. I mean, the Cowboys can be 5-11 one year, and the next summer on ESPN, they'll be debating whether or not the Cowboys are Super Bowl contenders. I don't ever hear talk about the Titans. The Titans went to the AFC Championship game, and then they won their division. They lost in the first round to a pretty decent Ravens team. Do you ever hear them bring in the panel and say, okay, guys, are the Titans Super Bowl contenders in the AFC? You never hear that. But if the Titans were the Cowboys, you'd hear it every day. Except today on the Julio Jones front, where Mike Tannenbaum, ESPN general manager, Kimberly Martin came on, gave the report that we played in the last segment, which was cross the Rams, cross the Ravens out. She hears a lot of Tennessee as a team that would be in for Julio. And she's hearing that maybe a third-round pick, maybe at best a second-round pick, is the compensation that's being offered for Julio. And Mike Tannenbaum was asked by Mike Greenberg on ESPN, which team is the best fit for Julio? Here's what he said.
It's Tennessee, Greeny, because they've lost a couple of good players, Corey Davis, John O. Smith, a really productive pass-receiving tight end. If they could pair Julio Jones with A.J. Brown, they still have Derrick Henry and a very productive Ryan Tannehill. Julio Jones very well may tip the balance in the AFC and close the gap between Tennessee and Kansas City. They need to be explosive on offense because they have some younger pieces on defense. Julio Jones could be consequential to the Titans.
Are we buying that? Former general manager says it could shift the balance of power in the AFC. Are we buying it? Jeff Saturday, who was also on the panel, was asked to follow up on Tannenbaum's comments, former longtime NFL player. Here's what Jeff Saturday said.
Let's go there, Jeff Saturday. If you put Julio Jones on the Tennessee Titans, and he mentions it, Tannehill, Henry, Brown, now Julio, what does that team become in your opinion, Jeff?
A true contender. And listen, and really it all sets up off of Derrick Henry because you have to bring 8 guys down the box, sometimes 9 to stop the run game because you know Tennessee stays committed to it. And what does that mean for Julio and A.J. Brown? That means man coverage on the outside. When you think about Julio and the ability to practice, if he does stay banged up the way he has the past couple seasons, it's going to be difficult to get a ton of reps with Tannehill. So if at least you get man-to-man coverage, you know Julio's really good at that, of getting open, of making plays on off-script type plays when the quarterback has to move. We know Tannehill's got nice athleticism getting outside the pocket. So it will be a nice benefit for Tennessee.
So the panel this morning loves it. I've thrown a lot out at you guys to start the show. 615-737-1025 is the phone number. 1, do we agree with my opening take today that I believe Julio Jones is going to the Titans? Again, no sourcing. This is not what I'm hearing. This is not, I talked to a guy who knows a guy. This is none of that. I just think the one team that never leaves the discussion when it comes to Julio Jones is Tennessee. And I think Atlanta knows he's going there. I think he knows he's going there. And I think the Titans know that at the end, Julio's coming here, just like Clowney last year. Except that Atlanta, I think, is drumming up a lot of noise in order to get the price to go up because just like with Clowney and just like with DeMarco Murray, I think the Titans have said, this is our price. Take it or leave it. If you get a better deal, congratulations to you. This is our price. So let's start with that. Do we buy that? And two, do we buy the fact that they're legitimate contenders, as Jeff Saturday and Mike Tannenbaum said? We'll start with you, Caroline.
I do believe that Julio will end up here. I said, I think last week, maybe there's like a 40-45. I felt that there was a 40 to 45% chance of Julio ending up here, and I kind of stand by that. Do I agree with it? No, not necessarily. Just considering the things that we've laid out the past few days, the amount of things that the Titans would have to give up, the amount of restructuring that the Titans would have to do in order to get Julio. I don't personally think that it is worth it, which brings me to your second point of do I think that the Titans are serious Super Bowl contenders if Julio is here. I think that the possibility exists, but I don't want to run with the idea that as soon as Julio Jones puts on a Titans uniform, the Titans are instantly Super Bowl contenders, because that's not the case. People were saying the same thing about Jadeveon Clowney when he signed with the Browns. As soon as he signed with the Browns, that was the first thing on Get Up the next morning, was that the Browns are instant Super Bowl contenders because they have Jadeveon Clowney. As we saw with Jadeveon Clowney's performance in Tennessee, that was not the case. So I'm not going to say that just because of the addition of Julio Jones, the Titans are Super Bowl contenders, but I think it does give them a better shot.
Ian, do you think he's coming here, and do you think they're Super Bowl contenders if they get him?
It does feel a lot like the Clowney thing last year, doesn't it?
It feels a lot like the Clowney thing.
Every week just kept saying, there's no way, like, they're not going to make it work. Is he really worth it? But everybody kept bringing up the Titans as a fit, whether it was a Vrabel thing or no, they didn't have any pass rush last year. Clowney, an obvious fit at an obvious need, would put them over the top. This year, they lost Jonnu and they lost Corey Davis, and they still have targets that they need, and they don't, nationally they see Josh Reynolds and they're like, okay, they obviously need a wide receiver. It's a perfect fit. So as far as that goes, it does kind of feel like Clowney and a lot of parallels there, and it does kind of feel like a logical fit. And I would not be surprised if the Titans got him. I do think it would help the offense, assuming he's a little bit of the Julio that we've seen before, but I do not think it puts him in the contender list.
So this is the hardest part that I have, and I think it's that I agree with you guys. I don't think you're a Super Bowl contender by adding Julio Jones. Are you a better football team because you add Julio Jones? Yes. I mean, they at this point would move Josh Reynolds into the slot, which Josh Reynolds probably doesn't want to do, but Josh Reynolds is going to have to suck it up and deal with it. Like, you're going to get to be the third wide receiver. Tannehill spreads the ball around a lot. They don't have a tight end. Like, you're going to have to deal with it, but slot, okay, fine. You're a better football team with Julio Jones, no doubt.
100%.
But I don't think you're a Super Bowl contender. Like, I asked Shane Bowen the question today, what gives you faith that the pass rush is actually going to work this year? And he was kind of like, we can't really tell right now this time of year with the guys out there with the can't hit. I mean, if you don't get a pass rush, you can't beat Kansas City. If you don't get a pass rush, you can't beat Buffalo. You know why you beat Buffalo last year when you housed them on that Tuesday night? Because Josh Allen turned the football over. That's why you beat them. And for some reason, I think that was the one game where Clowney played his best, was that Buffalo game. You got pressure, Josh Allen turned the football over, you won. Play him 10 times, it would have never played out like that again. Those are good football teams. Cleveland, see, this is where I kind of look at the AFC. And Fitz thinks that the Titans vault into that category if they get Julio Jones. Trevor Maddich yesterday on the show thinks that they vault into that category if they get Julio Jones. We heard Tannenbaum and Jeff Saturday. They think the Titans vault into that category if they get Julio Jones. I just guess I have too much respect for Kansas City and Buffalo. I am hesitant to put Baltimore or Cleveland or Indy or Pittsburgh into that grouping. I think the Titans are very strongly with them. And I'm not a believer in the Colts. Every year, Indianapolis, I don't know why they're not popular like the Dallas Cowboys, But every year I feel like we have the same discussions, which are this prominent national writer or this prominent ESPN analyst picks the Colts to win the South, and it happens every year for a different reason. Last year they were picking the Colts to win the South because they had Phillip Rivers. This year they're picking the Colts to win the South because they don't have Phillip Rivers. So I guess I struggle with why everybody always loves the Colts every year, but it's something that happens. I think the Titans are in that second tier. And I think there could be another team like the Chargers or somebody that emerges and kind of comes up into that tier. And I could see Pittsburgh or Baltimore maybe falling back. I don't think Julio Jones puts you into that top category. I'm also not the guy who would say, well, one player doesn't do it, because I think one player does. Put Tom Brady on the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, take away Jameis Winston's turnovers, you go from 7-9 to the Super Bowl champion. So that does have an effect. But I just don't think Julio is that big of a difference at this point. I really don't. And these are smart football guys that think this. Tannenbaum and Saturday and Trevor, and these are smart football guys. I guess I'm just not on the same page as these really smart football guys when it comes to believing the impact Julio will have on the offense, on the team, and what they are capable of with him in the lineup.
Yeah, I absolutely think that this offense would be elevated to another level. I just don't think it would play as big of an impact as I think that people are leading on that it would. And I would love to be proven wrong. I would love for Julio to come in and have 1,000-yard season, be able to secure the South for the Titans, to be able to bring this team past the first round of the playoffs, the thing that they have not done in quite some time.
Yes, we are all very much in favor of the Titans going to the Super Bowl, if that's in fact what everybody's implying.
Yes, that would be wonderful. That would be ideal. However, it's a lot to give up for a big if. But if the Titans are willing to go for it, and I say it, I mean the 2021 season, because I think after the 2021 season, I don't think that you have much of a big window there.
Sure. I mean, again, the window, as the Predators, the window opens before you probably expect it, and it closes probably before you expect it. Mm-hmm. And does Julio extend the window, or does Julio give you a better shot at it? 615-737-1025. We will get to your reaction. Again, today, I believe Julio Jones is going to be traded to the Tennessee Titans. I do. I do not believe the impact that he will have is as great as everybody's making it out to be. I could be wrong about Julio going to the Titans. I could be wrong about his impact. 615-737-1025 is our phone number. 615-737-1025. And coming up next, why the one thing, I'm not an in Robinson we trust kind of guy, because Robinson has been a good general manager for the Titans, but boy, he's had some screw-ups. The one thing that I trust about Robinson in this, that I actually believe in and will be disappointed if I'm wrong. We'll get to that next. 615-737-1025. Listen to 1025 The Game every weekday for your chance to win $1,000. It's the game's 1K payday presented by Kentucky Kingdom and Hurricane Bay. Listen in for keywords at 9, noon, and 3. When you hear it, go to thegamenashville.com and enter the keyword for a shot at $1,000. Stillman Company, we're delivered by TriStar Moving. It's ESPN 1025 The Game.
this team obviously is going to be in the mix. I think when you look at Julio Jones, the way he would fit, when you have a running game like that and there's so much influence on stopping the rushing attack, you get one-on-one on the outside. That is a great matchup. And then you have a guy on the opposite of him, an A.J. Brown, that could also make teams pay. So I think they'll be in the running. There's things that they could do to open things up as far as cap is concerned. They could definitely find a way to, part with the second-round pick if that's what it takes. So I think it's a strong possibility. It just seems like the Falcons are trying to get as much juice out of the orange as possible, and you just have to be careful because sometimes it gets messy and you don't really get, a good cup of juice.
There you go. That was TD yesterday. I thought that was very well said. TD on Darren, Donick, and Chase saying, hey, sometimes you want to get as much juice out of the orange, but sometimes it gets messy. And I will say this about a Julio Jones edition. We'll get to your phones in just 1 second, which is that is too much money for me. I told you the idea, the people that are saying, just restructure Tannehill's contract, know absolutely nothing about contracts in the National Football League. Nothing. Because, yes, you can restructure Tannehill and be able to afford Julio this year. But then you're committed to $205 million on a cap that has a ceiling of $208 million next year. Not a floor. A ceiling of $208 next year. And you'd have no rollover cap. And you'd have to re-sign Jayon Brown and Rashaan Evans and Harold Landry and Ben Jones. And even if you don't re-sign them, you need new players. So it just doesn't make any sense. The one thing I know about Robinson, and I think you guys would back me up on this, I am not one to sit back and not admit the screw-ups of John Robinson. Like, I think the political commentary has taught us now that if you like a guy or a guy represents your side, you take all of his screw-ups, throw them away, and talk about how great that person is doing. And I just don't believe in that. Robinson's been a great general manager. 5 years, 5 winning seasons, AFC title game, division, etc. Good picks, bad picks, but he's had some screw-ups. I mean, Clowney last year was a grade A screw-up, and everybody could see it coming, which I think maybe worries you a little bit about Julio here. But the one thing I know about Robinson, I saw it in the DeMarco Murray trade. I saw it in the Ryan Tannehill trade. I saw it in guys leaving like Jack Conklin, Corey Davis, Jonnu Smith. And I saw it in the re-signing of Jayon Brown, which is that Robinson sets his price and he's not going out of his price range in order to get something done. When Robinson decides this is what he's willing to pay, that is, in fact, what he's willing to pay. And he doesn't go above it. Derrick Henry didn't go above it. That was a long negotiating process that would have been a lot more tedious and tenuous if Derrick Henry wanted it to be that way. But Derrick wasn't going to complain about it. Derrick signed the tender. Derrick wasn't threatening to hold out. Derrick wasn't going to. So there wasn't a lot of drama. But, I mean, again, John Robinson stood on his price, and that's what we got. So if Atlanta is trying to, as TD said, get all the juice out of the orange, Robinson's not budging on that. Diana Rossini reporting on television that Atlanta has an offer for a first-round pick on the table, in my opinion, is not moving the needle for John Robinson. Because I have seen John Robinson do this too much, and I think one of the things that he's willing to do is to say, this is what I value this at, this is what I'm willing to pay. He would be the worst guy for a car salesman to have to deal with. Because they're going to try to, well, what about the features on this one? I'm willing to pay $32,000 for that car. Well, but if you go over here, you're willing to, no. I'm willing to pay $32,000 for that car. Let's go to your phone. 615-737-1025 phone line driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com. Tyrekus, we haven't heard from him in a minute. Tyrekus, thank you for calling. Kick us off. Go ahead.
How you guys doing, man?
Good.
I'm not a fan of trading a first or a second round pick for a guy who already reached his ceiling. Because I was talking to a fan last year. They said, we need to go ahead and trade Julio Jones while he still got value. And I was like, nah, y'all need to keep him. And then when he got injured this last year and he was on the injury report for 9 weeks, I was like, man, he just lost a lot of value, and now they want to trade him to the Titans. It's like, you didn't got him pregnant. He done had kids. He done got fat. Now, we don't want him. You know what I mean? I'm hanging up and listening.
Sure. So I think there's probably like a middle ground here with the idea that Julio is a first ballot Hall of Fame superstar that this team cannot live without. And Julio's a washed up bum who's got nothing left in the tank. I think there's probably a middle ground, which is Julio is a useful player on a team. He's a good player. He's a useful, but he'd be the number 2 wide receiver on the Tennessee Titans. Like, I think that is pretty well defined right now, that Julio Jones would be the number 2 wide receiver. And I think that you can always win with good number 2 wide receivers. I mean, I don't think there's and maybe I sometimes play into this because I am very strong with my tone or very strong with kind of the words that I choose or whatever. I'm against the idea of trading for Julio. I wouldn't do it. I'd keep the 3rd-round pick. Now, if you were going to tell me they were going to draft Monty Rice with that 3rd-round pick like they did this year, then maybe I'd be fine. Get rid of it. But I'd rather have the 3rd-round pick. I don't want to take on the salary. They probably feel a little bit differently. And I think that, again, they're not giving up a first, and I don't think they're giving up a second. And I don't think they're taking on $15 million. I think that this is going to be one of those deals very similar to the Ryan Tannehill deal, which was Miami had to give up a little bit, and Tannehill had to give up a little bit. Miami didn't want to pay Ryan Tannehill. When they wanted to get rid of, they were going to cut Tannehill if they didn't get something for him. So Tennessee offered a 4th. But the conditions that the Titans needed from both of them were, Tannehill, you got to take less money. Miami, you got to pay him most of it. I think Tannehill was due $17 million. I think that was somewhere around his contract that year, 17 or 20 or something like that. Miami approaches Tannehill and says, we want to trade you. Okay, find me somewhere I can go and play. The best we can do is Tennessee. Tennessee's already got a starter, but Mariota always gets hurt, and he may kind of suck anyway, so you might have a chance in Nashville if we trade you to Tennessee. But they want you to make $7 million instead of $17 million, and we're going to have to pay you 5 of it up front. Now, the deal Tannehill got out of this is he got to go somewhere where there was a pretty good chance he was going to get to play, but also Tannehill, I think, had 2 remaining years on his deal. They cut it to 1. So instead of the 2 years at 17 and you just get released and you don't get any of that money, you're getting $5 million today. And you get to be a free agent after this year, but you got to take less money. And you got to be a backup. I'm sure Tannehill didn't want to do that, but it was probably in his best interest, so he did. And I'm sure Miami didn't want to cut Ryan Tannehill a $5 million check to leave, but I think they wanted a 4th-round pick, so they decided, okay, go ahead and do it. And I don't think the Titans wanted to just get rid of a 4th-round pick for a backup quarterback, but Mariota's injury issue was such a concern that they really didn't have much of a choice. So everybody kind of had to give a little bit, and everybody got a little bit. Tannehill got to go to a team where he was wanted and would have a chance to play. Miami got a 4th-round pick, and Tennessee got insurance at quarterback. So to me, I think this is kind of a similar deal where John Robinson has said, here are the terms. We're willing to pay. Atlanta, you want a 3rd-round pick? Okay. But Julio's got to take less money, and you got to pay some of it. And Atlanta doesn't really want to do that, but nobody's offering anything better, so here you go. And Julio probably don't want to do that, but he'd be a starting receiver on a decent team with a good quarterback. So then the question is Atlanta willing to do that? Is Julio willing to do that? And then the subsequent question to that is, I think the reason the deal hasn't been consummated is because Atlanta and Julio are both looking for better deals. To me, I don't have any sourcing on this. I'm just kind of playing the, what do you really think's going on here based upon everybody's past. Julio wants to get paid. We know that. Julio values getting paid. This is a guy who signed a contract extension, then when other people signed bigger contracts the next year, then held out. So Julio cares about Julio. That's number 1. Number 2, Atlanta has no chance of bringing Julio back. The cat is out of the bag. He's already said, we all know, that he doesn't want to be there. And we know what's what. And then the third thing is, Josh Reynolds is nice, but I'm sure the Titans could use an upgrade. We'll get to your text. I'm not ignoring them. 615-737-1025 is our phone number. Stillman Company is delivered by TriStar Moving right here. It's ESPN 1025 The Game. Of course, we are streaming on The Game Nashville.
The sticking point really is the compensation, the age, and the health of this player. A lot of teams would like to add him, but how much are you going to give up? You know, I actually found out that the Ravens and the Rams, two teams that make sense on paper, you can cross them off the list of potential landing spots. So, you know, execs that I talk to around the league are skeptical that the Falcons are going to be able to get a 2022 first-round pick. In fact, a GM I spoke to last night said he would give up a third for Julio Jones.
A third for Julio Jones. I mean, I don't want to call Caroline Fenton a wizard, but yesterday
I'm willing to call myself a wizard.
We said yesterday, go ahead, put together the best offer for Julio. And Caroline put together a third this year, a fourth next year, and Atlanta eats $6 million in salary. I wonder, too, if it's not just Atlanta eats $6 million, Julio eats $3 million. So now that $15 million, Atlanta, you take on $6 million, so now you're down to $9 million.
Julio eats $3 million.
You don't get $3 million of it, so now I'm at $6 million. And that would make a lot of sense. Knowing the history that we know of John Robinson, that would make a lot of sense for the kind of trade they would make for Julio Jones.
Much more doable, and I think much more attractive for the Titans, considering all of the cap restrictions and considering all the gymnastics, the contract gymnastics they would have to go through. I think that would make it a much more realistic.
The other thing about this, too, is that second year hanging there. Like, I need to know what the dead cap for an acquiring team would be. So if the Titans were to acquire Julio, what is the dead cap if they cut him? Because dead cap includes like signing bonus and roster bonuses and things like that the Titans may not have to worry about, like that Atlanta's already paid. So what would that part be? But that's, again, I'm not a capologist, and unlike some of these other guys that bothered me on Twitter over the weekend, I don't pretend to be one either. I just know how contracts in the NFL work.
A capologist?
I am not a capologist.
I like that.
I did used to work with a capologist, though.
Is that is that real? Is that a thing?
Yeah, Vin Marino's best capologist in the league. He's
I like that.
capologist.
I'd like to be a capologist.
I don't think you have the right degree. I'm not a huge believer. Like in sports talk radio, it doesn't really matter what your degree is.
Yeah.
But I think it does. Like at any high level of corporate finance, I think it probably does matter what your degree is.
Well, then never mind.
And when you're a capologist, you're not the CFO of a billion-dollar company like the Titans have a CFO, but you are essentially the CFO of the most important element of the billion-dollar business. So it's like, are you more important than the actual CFO of the Titans, or are you less important? And it's probably somewhere in the middle. What is our text line saying, Caroline Fenton? You're on it.
One texter texted in and said the window is closing for Tannehill and Henry, which we have discussed a lot about that 2 to 3 year window with Tannehill and Henry. Knowing that the Titans need a tight end and a kicker, what do you do? Do you waste the rest of their years and wait on the rebuilding, which is around the corner for us? Or do you push all of your chips in and go for it and deal with the consequences later, but the winning window is now?
Because of our previous discussion about how much better Julio makes the Titans, and I disagree with Mike Tannenbaum's belief that Julio makes the Titans a contender for the AFC, that it puts them up there with Kansas City. I just don't believe that one guy who's injury-prone can do that for you. Like, I don't think there's an offensive lineman in football who's good enough for the Titans to add and then all of a sudden be a Super Bowl contender. I don't think there's a defensive player who doesn't sack the quarterback that could do that for the Titans. And I certainly don't think a wide receiver is that way either. I mean, when you look at the Titans going back to, I mean, they were an 8-8 team 3 years in a row. And a lot of that probably had to do with the fact that one of those years was in Houston where everybody knew they were lame ducks and they were gone after the end of the year. So they didn't have any fan support there. The next year, they were living in Nashville and practicing in Nashville, but flying and playing at home in Memphis. And they didn't have any fan support there. And the next year was at that crappy Vanderbilt Stadium, which was, if you can imagine, was even worse then than it is now. And so what can you build off of that? But again, 3 8-8 years in a row, you're an 8-8 team, right? Mm-hmm. Okay, add Javon Curse, 14.5 sacks, you're in the Super Bowl. I don't think Julio's that kind of player. You know, like that, to me, it's got to either be your starting quarterback or a sacker, or maybe if you go from no running game to Adrian Peterson in his prime. But those are the only kind of players that can do that for you. I don't think a second wide receiver does that for you.
And I think a lot of people are aware that if Julio does come to the Titans, that there will be certain consequences moving down the road in terms of, which we laid out yesterday with Ryan Tannehill's contract and extending Taylor Lewan. And people say now, well, we'll be okay with the consequences. But I wonder if that day does come, if the Titans do decide to sign Julio, if they don't win a Super Bowl, and if down the road they're really not a good team at all, will they be singing that same tune?
Ask the Predator fans today. I mean, this is the one thing I can tell you. Everything you feel about the Titans today, you felt about the Preds within the last 5 years. I mean, the Predators got to the Stanley Cup final. They got to Game 6, and we thought they were there. Like, we thought they were right there on the doorstep. And then they won the President's Trophy, and we thought they were there. And then they won a division, but they took a step back, so we thought they were a little bit further away, but we thought they were a Matt Duchene away. They weren't a Matt Duchene away. And this is the other thing, that again, you were telling me that the text line, there was like a reaction into the text line that had this kind of feeling of, because we don't believe, the three of us, don't seem to believe that the Titans are all of a sudden competitors with Kansas City if they had Julio Jones, that we don't think Julio is an upgrade, or that we don't think Julio can come in here and help out the Titans. And that's just not true.
That's exactly what he will do. He will definitely elevate this offense, and he definitely gives the Titans a better chance at winning. But to go from signing Julio Jones and then all of a sudden to Super Bowl, that's a big gap there.
Right. And so, because we don't think that, some people get mad. I mean, again, I go back to this Predators comparison. Remember, Matt Duchene was like the missing link? And while I'm not here to knock on Tannehill, I like Tannehill. Jared Stillman likes Tannehill. Jared Stillman was one of the first people to say, okay, I think he's the future at quarterback. I mean, I was Tannehill over Brady, though I have since softened my stance a little bit after Tannehill's not so great showing in that playoff game this year, and Brady won the Super Bowl. The Predators ultimately can't win the Cup because they don't have high-end forwards. When push comes to shove, that's what wins in the playoffs in the NHL. You watch the Tampa Bay Carolina series at all? And I told you, once I saw that goalie up close in person in Game 3, I said, Tampa's going to smack him. Because that goalie is an average goalie, and those forwards on Tampa are legit. You can't win in the playoffs consistently in the NHL without high-end forwards. It's hard enough to win with them, but you can't win without them. And the Predators have never had that. So we can talk about Julio Jones all we want, or we can talk about Kyle Turris or Matt Duchene or Brian Boyle or Wayne Simmons or Ryan Hartman or all these additions they've made. We can talk about that all we want and act like that's the missing piece, when in reality, it's those high-end forwards you can't just get. And I look at the Titans and I wonder, is Tannehill good enough to really get you there to compete? I mean, I will say I ended up getting COVID, so I didn't really work much the week after the AFC NFC Championship game. I thought Buffalo was going to walk into Arrowhead and smack Kansas City.
Really?
Because Buffalo was on fire. Buffalo had won something like 9 straight, and they were winning every game like 42-10. And they were just smacking people silly. And I thought the Bills just had teeth. And then Josh Allen got into that AFC Championship game. And I still think Josh Allen's a good quarterback, but I saw Josh Allen play on that stage, and I thought, okay, in the last 3 years in that stage, I've seen 4 quarterbacks. I've seen Mahomes 3 times. I've seen Allen. I've seen Tannehill. I've seen Brady. The one guy who could go toe-to-toe with Mahomes in that building was Brady. The one guy. Brady then, earlier that day, goes toe-to-toe with Rodgers in Green Bay and beats him. There's something to be said about that level of player, just like the level of forward in the NHL it takes in order to win a cup. And I just wonder, is Tannehill really that level of player? There's a lot of people. This time last year, I totally thought Tannehill could be that kind of player. After the Ravens loss, I struggled to get there. So this idea, again, about Julio and the Super Bowl or bust, or if you add Julio, don't we need to talk more about Tannehill? don't we need to talk more about, okay, if you add Julio Jones, is Ryan Tannehill good enough to win a Super Bowl? With Julio Jones, Josh Reynolds in the slot, A.J. Brown, Derrick Henry, is Tannehill good enough? And when I ask that question, I don't ask it with I don't think he's good enough. I do think he's good enough. I legitimately ask it with, is Tannehill good enough? ? And I think that's a discussion we should be having that I don't see a lot of people have.
Ben, would you think, in your opinion, is the more logical possible free agent, we don't know, to go after Aaron Rodgers? We don't know what's going on with Aaron Rodgers.
I don't think Green Bay. I ultimately don't think Green Bay is going to move him.
I don't think so either. They have held strong on that.
I think Green Bay looks at it like, screw you, Aaron. If you don't want to come back, screw you. And you owe us $30 million, $40 million. And I can applaud Green Bay, an organization that I think is incredibly overrated with a coach that I don't think is very good. I can applaud Green Bay for standing their ground to say, no, we're not doing the crybaby antics, Aaron. We're not doing it. So either write us a check or show up to practice. And I can appreciate that. No, I think the Titans, when they picked Tannehill over Brady, I think that they planted their flag in Tannehill. And Tannehill's done a lot of good. But I think that's kind of the question. So guess what? That's the question I'm going to ask next. 615-737-1025. And I want your calls and texts on it as well. If the Titans do add Julio Jones, which I think they're going to do, if the Titans add Julio Jones, is Tannehill good enough to win a Super Bowl? 615-737-1025. We will discuss that next. Stillman Company right here, ESPN 1025 The Game. Stillman Company is delivered by TriStar Moving, ESPN 1025 The Game. I have an update. I have some insight on a Julio Jones contract. We will get to the Tannehill. We will get to the Tannehill stuff in just a second. But this is from somebody that I trust, and I can tell you somebody that Floyd trusts. So that should mean something. Now, let me say this. And again, I think that I'm pretty honest with the people, things of that magnitude. Ian, do you remember how difficult discussions like this used to be with Floyd about like guaranteed money and, what is it guaranteed for? And that could be a fake
guaranteed for injury or not injury, fully guaranteed, roster bonus. The NFL contracts are extremely confusing.
Oh, it used to be like, what if you sign him for $100 million with 50 guaranteed? Well, what's the guarantee like? I mean, it was just, oh, God. So here you go. Here's what I've been told about Julio. The team that trades for Julio gets the base salaries in 21, 22, and 23, but none of the bonuses. So all of the bonuses have already been paid out. So there is $17 million in guaranteed salary, 15 this year, 2 next year. And then so right now, again, with Julio, you would be looking at $15 million this year, $2 million next year that you would have to pay. Somebody said, the same person said to me, I would imagine the team that gets him will rework the contract to allow him to keep the $17 million in guarantees while redistributing the money. So you could give him a $10 million signing bonus, $2 million in guaranteed salary this year with a cap charge of 5.3, and then $7 million next year with 5 guaranteed, and that would be a $10 million cap charge on next season, and then an $8 million salary with nothing guaranteed in that last year, and then it's $3.3 million in dead cap if you got it, which $3.3 million in dead cap, I mean, it's supposed to go up in 2023, so it's going to explode in 24. So 23, it's supposed to go up, so, that's basically just a throwaway year. So, again, I don't know if you work with Julio to redistribute the $17 million. I think you look at Julio, makes $15 million this year. Atlanta, you got to eat 6 of it. And Julio, you got to can 3 of it. And you got to take less money. And then put more money of that on Atlanta's cap or take more money off of your cap. I feel comfortable. While I did not like the Clowney deal last year, and I told you all why I didn't like it, I do feel comfortable that Robinson is not going to overextend himself salary cap-wise. That he's not going to say to Atlanta, this is how much I'm willing to take, or to tell Julio, this is how much I'm willing to pay this year, and then say, well, okay, fine, I'll pay a little bit more. That's not his MO. So, again, you're on the hook for $15 million this year, and I think it's an 11.3 is his salary next year, but I, again, was told it's a $2 million cap charge for the Titans. I still don't love it. So, again, it's all weird when you factor in the bonus. So, like, his base salary in 2021 for Julio is, if I'm reading this correctly, is 15.3. His base next year is 15.5, but only 2 of it is guaranteed. So you could dump him, and you would only have to pay $2 million. But the base is 11. So you'd have to work with him on that. But again, that's kind of the details on the Julio contract, which is that it's $17 million guaranteed over 2 years, and you could probably get Julio to screw around with the money one way or another in order to lower the cap charge this year and possibly lower the cap charge next year.
And that's another question that I have is how willing is Julio to budge on this salary? Because like we saw with J.J. Watt, and of course J.J. Watt wasn't attached to a team. He went wherever he was offered the most money. Is that what Julio is going to do? Is he going to keep in mind that Tennessee does not have state income tax? Is he going to is he going to go to a team that is going to win? Because if that's his first priority, you can probably take Jacksonville out of the mix.
Sure.
Is he going to go somewhere? I forgot who said something. It was a discussion on ESPN that Julio would feel at home in Nashville because he just spent so much time in Atlanta and he went to Alabama, and so he would stay in the South. Is that a priority of his?
Also, pretty strong assumption to make, by the way, that he went to college 3 hours away and he played 4 hours away. When I heard
that, I was like, hey, if somebody's throwing me $16 million to move to Foxborough, I think I may possibly consider it.
Jonnu Smith's from Miami. And he had no problem taking the money to go to Foxborough.
That's fine. If you're going to throw me millions of dollars, that's totally fine. But I do wonder what his priorities are and how much he's willing to budge and how much his wants and desires are in consideration for this deal with the Falcons.
615-737-1025. The other discussion we had is this. If you give Ryan Tannehill, if you give him Julio Jones, and then he's got A.J. Brown on one side, Derrick Henry behind him, Julio on the other, Josh Reynolds in the slot, and again, you're playing games at tight end, whatever. I think it honestly would probably be Swaim. If you had to say, okay, who is the starting tight end for the Tennessee Titans, I would say Swaim, because there's only one football, and I don't need the football to go all around. I've got enough footballs to get to AJ, enough footballs to get to Julio, enough footballs to get to Derek. I don't need, to just throw the ball to the tight end a lot. Then again, the Tannehill MO is to throw it to who's ever open. Is Tannehill good enough to win a Super Bowl with that crew? Is he good enough? And the closest comparison I would use to Tannehill here is going to be Donovan McNabb. Donovan McNabb was a really good quarterback in Philadelphia, but he was never a great quarterback. McNabb was never Manning. He was never Brady. He never put up the stats like Kurt Warner did when he was with the Rams and then later Arizona. He was never that high-end guy. Somewhere between Donovan McNabb and Eli Manning is Ryan Tannehill right now. And Donovan McNabb didn't win the Super Bowl when he had Terrell Owens, but they got really close. And the one thing I'll say about A.J. Brown, about Derrick Henry, and I assume this is the way with Julio, though I don't know this for a fact because I've never covered Julio, I don't think those guys have Terrell Owens-like personalities. So T.O. had that 1 year in Philly where he was unstoppable. Then after the 1 year in Philly, it was an utter disaster between him and Donovan and Andy Reid, and then it's, sit-ups in the driveway and Drew Rosenhaus press conferences, and it just turned into a disaster. But I do wonder, I believe in my head that Donovan McNabb with T.O. was good enough to win a Super Bowl. Donovan McNabb without T.O. was not good enough to win a Super Bowl. Does a 32-year-old Julio Jones, along with A.J. Brown and Derrick Henry, is that enough to put Tannehill over the Tannehill here? And I remember I am a Tannehill fan.
Yeah, that's tough, and it almost begs the question that if Julio does come to the Titans and the Titans cannot win playoff games with Julio, A.J. Brown, Josh Reynolds in the slot, and Derrick Henry as running back, then what is it going to take?
Then you're probably just not good enough to win a Super Bowl.
Right. And is it going to take the Titans getting Julio Jones and realizing maybe Ryan Tannehill isn't that guy? Maybe Ryan Tannehill isn't the guy to get them to a Super Bowl? I think he can be. I think he just needs elements. Tom Brady, on the other hand, I fully believe that if Tom Brady was with the Jets, he's not going to win a Super Bowl.
No, but Tom Brady would have never gone to the Jets because of that reason.
Yes. He's going to set himself up in the best position, but I do think that Tom Brady could be on a team that otherwise isn't Super Bowl caliber. You add him, and it becomes a Super Bowl caliber team. I don't think Ryan Tannehill is that kind of guy. But with those assets and an elevated defense that the Titans have started collecting over the offseason, if that's not going to do it, what will?
Ian, do you think you win a Super Bowl with Tannehill?
Well, I think adding Julio would only help that. Do I think you can? Yeah, I think you can. Yeah, with Julio especially. Is it going to be easy? Of course not, but I think you could. Sure.
I don't know. I mean, this is the real question, right? This is the crux of the argument. I can argue either side, honestly. My gut tells me Tannehill's not good enough. And I love Tannehill. I freaking do. Especially after the ineptitude at quarterback that the Titans have had for a decade before Tannehill. I mean, Marcus couldn't stay healthy. Vince Young was off his rocker. Jake Locker freaking sucked. And then there were all the other guys in between, whether it was Billy Volek and all of his stats that went into just purgatory of doing nothing for the rest of his career, or whether it was, Ryan Fitzpatrick throwing interceptions left and right, or Matt Hasselbeck the year that he was the quarterback, or hell, even when Doug Sling Johnson played quarterback for a game. I mean, I've seen it all with the Titans. I just think Tannehill's just a step short. And I know this sounds crazy because there's a lot of guys that I think are capable of winning a Super Bowl who have never won a Super Bowl before. So, I believe that Phillip Rivers at his peak was capable of winning a Super Bowl. I think he was a good enough quarterback in order to win a Super Bowl at some point. But he just never did. I think Steve McNair was capable of winning a Super Bowl at some point. He just never did. Tannehill, this time last year, I would have said yes. That Ravens game has left a bad taste in my mouth. Now, that last drive against the Ravens, he didn't have Corey Davis, who was hurt. And his passing options at that point were a Jonnu Smith, who dropped the ball, A.J. Brown, who they were all over, although the one interception play, A.J. was wide open, which bothers me. Khalif Raymond, Cam Batson, and Nick Westbrook-Akina. And I don't think anybody's winning a Super Bowl with those guys. But I think that if they do trade for Julio, then this becomes the ultimate referendum on Tannehill, which is, can he do it? 615-737-1025. That's the question for you. 615-737-1025. Can you win this with Ryan Tannehill as your quarterback? 615-737-1025 if you add a Julio Jones. ESPN 1025 The Game and T-Mobile have partnered up to give you a chance to experience a Nashville SC game this season. Tune in every Monday to Darren, Donick, and Chase for the keyword to text and to win. Good luck from 1025 The Game, T-Mobile, and Nashville SC. Trevor Maddich had some strong thoughts yesterday about the idea of adding Julio to the Titans. We'll also get to that next. We're live from the Wholesaling Studio, powered by RumbleOn.com. It's ESPN 1025 The Game, and we're streaming on the Game Nashville app.
If you take that premise that Tennessee is not a Super Bowl contender today, Julio Jones won't get them there, right? I think that they are just a couple of pieces away from being a Super Bowl contender, and I think Julio Jones would be the first on the list of those pieces. Again, this assumes that defensive back, first-round draft choice, Caleb Farley, corner, is able to stay healthy and play at a high level. Assuming that, I think Jones is the one player who is available to get who would elevate this team as a single player and make other guys around him better, other units around him better, because of the way he forces mismatches on the other side of the ball. He's the best player with the biggest impact that can take them to that promised land. And really, he's probably the only one that I've seen that's out there that's available that could do that.
There you go. That was Trevor Maddox yesterday on our show. What do we make, Caroline, of the offensive linemen? Jeff Saturday today and Trevor Maddox yesterday, both Indianapolis Colts ex-offensive linemen, saying, hey, you add A.J. Brown to the mix. You add Julio to the mix. Julio, A.J., Derrick Henry, let's ride, baby. Because I just think it's more complicated than that. I don't think you just build all-star teams in the NFL and say, go get it. I mean, I think what you do in the NFL in order to have success is you've got a Chris Sanders on your team, and you've got Derek Mason playing great at wide receiver, number one guy, Frank Wycheck tight end, number one guy, Eddie George, number one guy, and there goes old Chris Sanders just running down the field, and of course he's in man coverage because he's not Derek Mason, Frank Wycheck, or Eddie George. And Chris Sanders just burns by that one DB, and Steve McNair with that big arm chucks it down the field, and you got a touchdown. Mecole Hardman of the Kansas City Chiefs on a team where you got to worry about Tyreek Hill and Travis Kelce, and Hardman just runs right by your guy, touchdown. I mean, I don't see that with any of these guys. Maybe Reynolds, but I got two former offensive linemen that are telling me, hey, Ian, if you could with that Jeff Saturday, I got two former offensive linemen that are like, oh, if you get Julio, this just bombs away. Here's what Saturday said this morning.
Let's go there, Jeff Saturday. If you put Julio Jones on the Tennessee Titans, and he mentions it, Tannehill, Henry, Brown, now Julio, what does that team become in your opinion, Jeff?
A true contender. And listen, and really it all sets up off of Derrick Henry because you have to bring 8 guys down the box, sometimes 9 to stop the run game because you know Tennessee stays committed to it. And what does that mean for Julio and A.J. Brown? That means man coverage on the outside. When you think about Julio and the ability to practice, if he does stay banged up the way he has the past couple seasons, it's going to be difficult to get a ton of reps with Tannehill. So if at least you get man-to-man coverage, you know Julio's really good at that, of getting open, of making plays on off-script type plays when the quarterback has to move. We know Tannehill's got nice athleticism getting outside the pocket, so it will be a nice benefit for Tennessee.
So, I mean, what do we make of it? These two former offensive linemen are like, let it ride, baby.
Well, of course, because it sounds really great. You know, it was the same conversation with Myles Garrett and Jadeveon Clowney. Oh, they're going to be unstoppable. You know, the thought of Julio and A.J. Brown and Derrick Henry, all of these offensive powerhouses, it's going to be great. Go for it. It sounds really good. But the names on the back of jerseys don't score touchdowns.
True.
Just because Julio Jones is a huge name doesn't mean that he is going to score a touchdown every single game. So it's hard to not get so caught up in the star power and the names and the success that they have historically had. But that's not everything, especially in football. I think in basketball, you could maybe make that argument because if you have one superstar, you can build around it. But just because they're a superstar does not mean that they are going to contribute in a way that you think they should or that you expect them to. So yes, I'm with them. It sounds really great. It sounds really fun. This idea of this such a star-packed offense. But when you get to the core of it, when you think a little bit deeper, does it make sense?
Let's go to your phone, 615-737-1025. Phone line driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com. Mike, thank you for calling. You're up next on Tannehill. Go ahead, Mike.
Hey, Jared, I think one thing that you are downplaying a little bit with Tannehill is that our receivers typically don't get much separation. It's almost like every ball is contested. Occasionally somebody breaks loose like Khalif Raymond did for the deep balls when he was there. But
Sure.
He's still decisive and accurate and has to thread the needle with almost every throw. And I think with someone like Julio, it kind of opens things up a little bit more for everybody. I hope, then they can actually, because the Titans seem to be such a yards after catch. Even AJ, he's a yards after catch guy, not a wide open guy.
So I appreciate your call, Mike. I worry about Julio's down the field threat at this point in his career, especially after a hamstring injury. I get very nervous thinking about 32 years old trying to burn past people. TD keeps pointing out to me that Josh Reynolds, and I didn't hear what Reynolds said in his press conference, and TD, I think, locked in on this when Reynolds said it, But Reynolds was really excited about catching the deep ball from Ryan Tannehill. And the reason that I think TD's brought that up is because Reynolds maybe highlighted the fact that Jared Goff wasn't the best in the world at delivering the football when it came to the deep ball. Tannehill's got a nice deep ball. Now, he's missed some deep balls over the year, but no quarterback's going to hit on every deep ball. I think that is a big question with Ryan Tannehill. Can he throw deep and outside the numbers? Because I know, to the point of the caller, he can put it there. Right there. That's why he loved Adam Humphries when he was healthy. That's why he's essentially given Anthony Ferkser a career, because Tannehill, if you're open, Tannehill's going to put the ball there for you. AJ is great because you can run the slant with AJ. Tannehill puts it right on his hands, and AJ just throws the DB off and runs into the end zone for a touchdown. Those play action, ball comes out quick, boom, that's great. With Julio, I think Julio's biggest strength, and where the biggest upgrade from Corey Davis to Julio would be, is going up and getting the ball. To the point of the Jeff Saturdays and the Trevors and the idea of, pick your poison with AJ and Julio. If you put one corner on Julio and I throw it up to him, I expect him to get it away from that corner. Because there's not a corner in this league who's as big as Julio Jones and who can run like Julio Jones when Julio knows where he's going and the DB doesn't. And so if you want to start committing 2 or 3 guys to Julio, now AJ has to break one guy and he's running all the way into the end zone for a touchdown. I do believe that. But I don't know, again, about the deep ball here. That's why when Denzel Mims was available a couple of years ago in the draft, I was like, do you take him here? Because he is a speed guy. And I've always felt like the Titans needed a speed guy at wide receiver, and they still technically don't have it. Although, again, TD thinks that Josh Reynolds could be that guy. What do we have in the text line?
Andrew texted in and said someone said this morning on the morning show to propose a trade for Julio Jones and Hayden Hurst so the Titans can get a wide receiver and a tight end. What would you give for that?
So I did put that into I think our little show text before about the idea of doing a double deal that includes Hayden Hurst. Mm-hmm. I think I'd be for it. There's a lot of talk about Rashaan Evans maybe going to Atlanta in a deal. I certainly think the Titans would want to include Evans in that deal. I don't know how Dean Pease or how Arthur Smith feel about Rashaan Evans. That is a trade I'd be willing to make. Now, run support has had injury issues, so now you really are running Monty Rice out there. But again, a third-round pick, I got to believe that the guy should be ready to play. So would I do Evans plus whatever pick? I think we've agreed on a third-round pick. Evans, next year's third, the 2023 fourth for Julio. Atlanta eats money. You restructure Julio's deal, and you get Hayden Hurst. That's a lot of crap that I just threw out there.
That's a lot.
That makes it a very complicated deal. But that would be killing 2 birds with 1 stone. Essentially 3, because you'd be getting rid of Evans at the same time. So you'd be getting rid of Evans, you'd be getting a tight end, you'd be getting Julio Jones, you move Reynolds into the slot, and yeah, I'd be okay with that. I mean, I'd be okay with just a swap. Because, make them separate now. That third and fourth, that's all that talk about Julio. And then the money thing, and again, that's that talk about Julio. It's really then at that point, Evans for Hurst, and I think I'd do that trade. Now, I saw yesterday that the Falcons are moving Keanu Neal, the safety. They're moving him to linebacker. So they've already got Deion Jones. You move Keanu Neal to linebacker, then I think you have 2 middle linebackers, and then they're not interested in Rashaan Evans anymore. So I don't know what Arthur thinks of Hayden Hurst. I don't know what Arthur's plan is with Kyle Pitts. Maybe this is one where you send Ferkser back in the deal and you get Hayden Hurst, and that evens out the money a little bit because Hayden Hurst, I think, probably makes more money than Ferkser does. And you even out that Julio money some way, somehow, but now you have a starting tight end, and Arthur has a guy he knows and he trusts and who knows Arthur's offense to be with Kyle Pitts. So maybe I could see that. A lot of moving pieces there.
A lot of moving pieces, but seems like a trade that would make sense because who did the Falcons just draft? A tight end.
Yep.
What do the Titans need? A tight end. So it just makes sense.
Oh, yeah, no, certainly. I totally agree with that. What's next?
Matt texted in and said, I don't like Julio at this current price, but if AJ goes down with an injury, Julio would be a nice piece to slide into that wide receiver 1 role. That's the only positive I see in this potential trade.
So I love when everybody brings up the if so-and-so goes down with an injury. That is like literally 95% of the teams in the NFL that don't have a contingency plan for if somebody gets hurt.
Anyone could get hurt at any point.
Like, what is the Rams' plan if Matthew Stafford gets hurt? What is the plan for the Titans if Derrick Henry gets hurt? So I understand the idea of if AJ gets hurt and they can't. AJ's had to be carried off the field about 15 times over the last 2 years, and then he's missed like 2 plays and goes back in the game. And I don't know if, he ended up having that surgery after the year. I don't know if AJ's just really tough or if he's got that Albert Hainsworth disease where Albert had to just go down and then Albert take a couple plays off, Albert be right back out there on the field. I don't know. But it's certainly something.
And I think it's also pretty bold to say that that's the only positive that you would see in this trade.
Yeah, I mean, the positive is that all of a sudden you went from having 1 wide receiver, like 1.5 wide receivers to 3. Because even though people love Davis around here, I never did, you could never depend on Davis, and all of you know it. So now you literally go to having 3. Because I think Reynolds is a lot better than people are giving him credit for. By the way, this is what Josh Reynolds said about the deep ball when he signed and was interviewing with the national media. Here's what Reynolds said, and pick up on this perhaps if you see what TD said about how he's excited about the deep ball from Tannehill. Take a listen.
Do you feel like this is more of an opportunity to really kind of showcase the potential that maybe you weren't quite able to do in LA all the time?
Yeah, I do. Tannehill, he likes to throw them deep. So I mean, that was that's basically what I did, man. And I'm looking forward to being able to kind of have those 3-level throws and the strikes that I was doing like I was in with the Rams. And so I'm definitely excited to be able to kind of bring that, that deep ball kind of threat and 50-50 ball kind of threat to Titans, man.
Okay, so he wants the deep ball, 50-50 ball. You know what? I'm not one. I mean, you know that I'm against the Julio trade, but boy, I'll tell you, that's a lot of juice. With Reynolds, Julio, AJ, Derek, there's a lot of juice there. 615-737-1025 is our phone number, 615-737-1025. The Preds players talk today. I have a Predators thought that I want to get to. We'll do that coming up next. And we've got our headlines with Caroline coming up later this hour as well. Stillman Company right here on ESPN 1025 The Game. Basketball. By the way, I got in last night. Now, I lost both my basketball bets on Caroline's.
How about them Suns, baby?
First of all, how about Damian Lillard? Because yesterday you took Denver -2, and I was just praying.
I was sweating.
I was just praying when it went to overtime. I'm like, just lose by 1. That's okay. Just lose by 1.
Nope. But 1 by 4.
That Damian Lillard is a bad boy, if there ever was one. Not that anyone didn't know that already, but oh my goodness, last night, I heard Stephen A. say this today when he was like, that was like Michael Jordan last night. If I didn't watch that in live time, I'd have said, okay, easy talking about Michael Jordan.
No.
That was some Michael Jordan stuff last night.
He dropped 12 threes in double overtime. I saw a tweet that said Damian Lillard just painted the Sistine Chapel and his squad just power washed it.
The guys on his team couldn't catch the ball.
Nope.
They couldn't stay in bounds. They couldn't dribble the ball. They could do. Damian Lillard, I got to tell you, get that man out of Portland. Get him out of Portland. He deserves better than to be in that crap city, in that soggy.
Have you even been to Portland?
I have been to Portland.
Okay.
In that soggy, just crap dump city.
What's with the Portland
slander? Portland sucks. I spent a week in Portland my senior year of college. Never again. It was soggy and depressing and just not my vibe. And I think vibe is probably the right word to describe Portland.
Yes, there's very much so a Portland vibe.
Not my kind of thing. But I did do really well. I went to one of those casinos, on the reservations.
Uh-huh.
Oh, man,
Well, that's good.
Had a good
That's all
time
that
at the-
matters, really.
Had a good time at the reservation in Portland.
Like, I had a good time on Caroline's last
But
night.
other than that, Damian Lillard, bad boy. Speaking of the NBA playoffs, my official sportsbook app, the FanDuel Sportsbook app, the playoffs are here. And you'll be in hoops heaven betting all the action on the FanDuel Sportsbook app. There are so many exciting matchups, and FanDuel is taking the excitement to another level because new and existing users can bet risk-free throughout the playoffs. New users can get up to $1,000 back if your first bet doesn't win. Plus, once you have an account, you can bet one same-game parlay risk-free every week. So you can be like me, and you can take Los Angeles last night and Portland last night and feel like an idiot. But you can do it, and of course, if you don't win, you'll get up to $10 back. Basketball fans, now is the perfect time to give FanDuel a shot. Just sign up with the promo code JGM to bet the NBA playoffs risk-free, exclusively on the FanDuel Sportsbook app. Must be 21 and older and present in Tennessee. Risk-free bet for first online real money wager only, and refund issued as non-withdrawable site credit that expires in 14 days. Same-game parlay refund issued as non-withdrawable site credit that expires in 7 days. Max refund $10. Restrictions apply. See terms at sportsbook.fanduel.com. Same-game parlay available for multiple sports in all states on mobile/web. Gambling problem? Call Tennessee Redline 1-800-889-9789.
How much do those final 2 months and taking Carolina to 6 games, how much does that play into any potential optimism for what's to come with this group in the future here?
Yeah, it definitely does. I mean, Ryan is right. I think if you looked how we turned it around and the way we played down the stretch, I think maybe one top 5 teams in the league, probably down the last 20 games or so. And there's definitely a lot of confidence we can take from that. And playing Carolina, they're an unbelievable team. They're one of the top teams in the league. And I thought it was a really, really tight series. Most games except for game one, I think could have gone either way. And I thought we played them well. But the way we played down the stretch in the playoffs will definitely give us some confidence going into next season.
That was Roman Josi today. Predators players had their exit interviews with the local media, and in it there were two themes. One really bothered me. One, I think, maybe highlights something that maybe there needs to be a little bit more digging on. The first thing is, and I literally got sick of hearing this, kind of what Josi just said right there with the, hey, the way we played down the stretch and the way we played in that playoff series, we feel great about where we're headed. I don't think so. I mean, I like Ryan Johansson today was talking, and he said, if we just played the first part of the season like we played the rest of the season, we would have had a good season or something like that. Again, I'm paraphrasing. But once you make the playoffs, who cares about how you did at the beginning of the season? Like, why would I care that you sucked at the beginning of the year? You made the playoffs. The truth is this team's just not good enough. Like, this group is not good. There have got to be changes. There have got to be big changes. And you know me, I want to change at the top because the top is where we have been asking for changes, and they've been making changes, and every change they've made has not worked. So, I mean, as I said with David Poile, I think he deserves the right way out. Obviously, the Predators think differently because he's having a press conference tomorrow, so I'm guessing he's not going to be handing over his duties of running the team. But I'm at a point right now where I look at it like enough is enough. And it feels like listening to those player interviews today, I felt like I was being sold, hey, this core group is good enough. This core group, we proved this year by not stinking it up at the end that we proved we're good enough. And I just cannot go along with that anymore. I mean, after you went to the Cup final, we knew that you were good enough and you won a President's Trophy, and we felt good, okay? Then they said, don't tear us apart. And we said, okay, fine. And they didn't tear you apart. And then the team wasn't as good, and we were told big changes. Then PK goes out, Matt Duchene comes in. And they're terrible, and they fire the coach. And all of a sudden, it's like ever since then, the Predators have just been hanging on for dear life, and every little incremental victory is treated as if it is like monumental. You got to 6 games in the first round of a playoff series to a team that is on the verge of getting spanked in 5 games by Tampa Bay. Tampa Bay, we can all agree, defending Cup champions, great players, great goalie. Tampa Bay might win the Cup this year. Like, to me, it's them in Colorado. Tampa Bay may win the Cup, and they are having their way right now with Carolina. I mean, they have gone into Carolina, a place you couldn't win. And in 2 games, I think Corey Curtis said that they've lost 3 games in regulation all season long. They've lost 2 in regulation at home to the Tampa Bay Lightning in the first 2 games. Tampa's going to take one of those games in Tampa, maybe both of them, and it's a 4 or 5 game series. That's how far away you are from competing for the Cup, which is far. If this were an NBA team, there would be a lot of talk about firing the general manager. I'm surprised there's not at least a little bit more around here, but I get it. But again, I thought the players, it felt very obvious to me that they kept saying, hey, we really believe in this group after what we did. But I don't believe in the group. Getting to 6 games in the first round is not something that it's not a flag that I would raise to say, congratulations, guys, you got to 6 games. It was a fun, entertaining series. The margins were razor thin, but enough with the, hey, we proved this year that we're for real. You got to the first round. You got to Montreal, which has already fired their coach this year and is 100% not for real. Montreal is in the second round. So I have a hard time.
That was also kind of a funky thing that happened with Montreal and Toronto, but I see where you are coming from.
I think it's a normal thing that happens to Toronto.
Unfortunately,
now, what
funky
Montreal,
is normal.
Yes. I would say this. I look around at the best teams in the league. Boston, the Islanders, Colorado, Vegas, Tampa Bay, they have high-end talent. They got great forwards, especially Colorado and Tampa Bay. I think Colorado and Tampa Bay have proven themselves as the two best teams in the league right now. Mm-hmm. And I just don't think you are anywhere close to them. And I don't think you're getting anywhere close. You're not taking a first line of Philip Forsberg, Ryan Johansson, and Matt Duchene and going toe-to-toe with the Tampa Bay Lightning ever. So, again, there need to be big changes. And I it's one of these things where you want your team to win. But I look back in hindsight, and I'm like, was it a bad thing? If the narrative is going to be allowed to be spun, that by turning their season around, making the playoffs by the skin of their teeth against a bad Chicago team and a broken Dallas team, as Greg Wyshynski said on this show, if that's the gold standard for marking an achievement, then I retroactively wish they would have just stunk this year. Because when things were bad, there was a lot of fire Poyle talk. And I haven't moved off of it. Like, I decided when I think it was like right around Valentine's Day, and I had just seen enough, and I said, okay, it's time. And I haven't moved off of that. And, the coach, I think he did a good job coaching this season. I thought he was horrendous as far as strategy in the playoffs was concerned. I'm not sold on the coach as a long-term win you a cup answer. And I'm not sold on the core. So I just listened to those guys. Look, it was fun. It was a fun month.
It was so fun, and I don't want to discredit anything that the Predators were able to do this past season in terms of turning the season around and getting themselves a playoff spot, place that they weren't really supposed to be. I don't want to discredit that.
But that's not our goal.
Correct. That's not the goal, and that's why I was a little bit confused in interviews today when people were saying, okay, no, like we're almost there. We almost got it. We found that identity. We're almost quite there. And it felt like, I'm not going to say it felt like they were okay with it, because they very clearly were not. They seemed very disappointed at the fact that they're not still playing in the playoffs. It just felt like there wasn't enough oomph to be able to say, wait, no, we want to be in a place where we can win a Stanley Cup, but we're not there yet.
Yeah,
but that wasn't the sentiment.
They need to make big changes, and I don't think they're going to. I don't think they're going to make humongous changes with the roster. I don't think they're changing the coach. I don't think they're changing the general manager. And I guess, for me, I've said my piece. But, it's just, I guess it's a difference of opinion between me and them. Headlines with Caroline is next. Boy, we got a lot of headlines to get into. We will do that next. Stillman Company. We're delivered by TriStar Moving. It's ESPN 102.5 The Game. Stillman Company right here, ESPN 1025 The Game. Let me tell the fine folks out there. Go to thegamenashville.com. Check out Nashville's best deals. This week, purchase a $30 Boomboss Craft Pizza and Tap House gift card for only $15. Try their award-winning pizza, 20-plus local beers, drafts at all locations. It's the place to go to bring the family or come for pizza, beer, and sports. 4 Middle Tennessee locations, Bellevue, Murfreesboro, Spring Hill, and East Nashville, which has a huge video wall. Get yours now at thegamenashville.com. Time now for Headlines with Caroline.
We're spanning the sports world. It's Headlines with Caroline on Stillman Company, right here on Nashville's best sports talk, ESPN 1025 The Game and the Game Nashville app.
I just learned recently that I am in the presence of a celebrity.
Well, there's only one person in this room, and I know it ain't me.
Well, Nashville Sounds is partnering with Folds of Honor and announced today that the Rock and Jock Celebrity Softball Game will feature none other than Jared Stillman tomorrow.
I am in the Rock and Jock Celebrity Softball Game. But again, Folds of Honor.
First Horizon Park tomorrow.
First Horizon Park. Terry Bradshaw is throwing out the first pitch. We were going to have Terry on the show, but unfortunately, after Terry went on a non-Fox radio station and said the Aaron Rodgers stuff, Terry has now been apparently, I've been told, informed by Fox that Terry needs to go on Fox. And I get it.
I feel like Terry Bradshaw probably has a pretty short leash when it comes to these kinds of things.
And if I was making the kind of money Terry Bradshaw was making to do Fox, I would listen to what they have to say. But we were going to try to get Terry on, but Terry is going to throw out the first pitch tomorrow night. Folds of Honor. It's at First Horizon Park. There's a link that I'll tweet out here shortly. But there's a link where you can buy tickets. We'll be doing the show tomorrow from First Horizon Park, I've been told. So I have no idea who's on my team. I could be on A.J. Brown's team.
A.J. Brown, Taylor Lewan, Russell Dickerson, Chris Lane.
I could be on somebody's team. I could not be on somebody. I have no idea. And by the way, I don't know who all those people are, but
country music stars, Will Compton, Jeff Dye.
You know what? I'll say this about Folds of Honor. It is a great cause. So if you've got nothing to do tomorrow night, tickets I think are as low as like $25.
$25 it says, and then $35 for premium seats.
$35 for premium seats. Anybody who buys tickets and comes out tomorrow, I will stay after the game and take a picture with or whatever. I'll do whatever I can tomorrow night. But again, I'll tweet out the link here momentarily. But yes, I'm really excited to be a part of that Folds of Honor event and hopefully raise a lot of money for veterans for everything that they do for our country. I mean, I think Memorial Day certainly is one of those days where we think about what they do for our country. But when you've done all the stuff that we've done here, especially at 1025 The Game, to help support our veterans and, you know, our current servicemen and women, I certainly do not, it is not lost on me how honored I am to be able to give back to them because they mean a freaking lot to all of us.
Absolutely. Very well said. And Folds of Honor says provides educational scholarships to spouses and children of America's fallen and disabled service members. So absolutely a very, very noble cause, and I am very proud of you, and I will be cheering you on. I know it's called Headlines with Caroline, but I've got some Pred lines with Caroline after our media availability with the Predators today. So Brian Johansson, as well as Matt Duchene and Roman Josi and Matthias Ekholm, it was echoed a lot today, and we touched on it in the last segment. It was echoed a lot today about the identity of this team and what it took to start winning. And they said that we've heard a lot about the buy-in, about the identity, about how it took them finding their identity to start winning those games. Here is what Brian Johansson had to say earlier.
You talk about the identity and us coming together and finding a way to get in a playoff spot. I think we go into a regular season, we play 82 games the way we did in these last couple of months this year and have just grow that confidence and belief in this group. And, you know, we feel like our potential is right there at the top of the league and that we can contend for a cup. So.
Yeah. So I hear him. I hear him saying, you know, if we go into this upcoming season with this same identity, with this same vibe, quote unquote, to use that word, then we'll be in a better position than we were last year.
Do you actually hear him?
I hear him, but I don't agree with him.
Okay.
Because I get it. You're going to go into the next season having the same kind of core group, the same foundation that has been built in the 2020-2021 season. However, Where was that identity in the playoffs? If this is that same identity that you had, that you collected over the season, and you feel like you're in a good place and you feel like the future is bright, then why didn't that come through in the playoffs? And Matt Duchene said, when asked about a Stanley Cup, he said, I think we're right there.
So here's what bothers me about the identity talk. First of all, I cut off these interviews today because no one's going to tell you what they actually think. I mean, I think Pekka said that he would open the door, to maybe going to another team, or basically didn't want to limit any options that he had, and that may be the most newsworthy item. But none of these players are going to tell you what they actually think because they don't want it to affect them. And I would just say that, do they really think they can win a cup with this group? Like, do they really? And I don't think they do. And I've heard the same rhetoric time and time again. You made it to the first round of the playoffs 3 years in a row. And having sucked so bad at the beginning of the year and then gotten better and barely made the playoffs doesn't really change the fact that you did, in fact, stink at the beginning. Like, it doesn't change how far away you are from a cup. And I just thought that we had higher standards around here. So I am operating under the idea that they have higher standards, or that we should have higher standards. And I do, and I don't think this core group's getting it done for you. So I think there have to be massive changes. And as I said earlier today, you know how big I think those changes need to be. I guess I'm the only person in town, though, who thinks that. So I don't know.
And you touched on it, my next point with Pekka. It did not take very long for Pekka to be asked about his future. And he said, I'm still deciding. I want to take the time to think about it. So no future plans have been set for Pekka Rinne. And Roman Josi said, he mentioned, I think Pekka has years left on him. So Pekka to a different team. He said, I'm not going to rule anything out, which he shouldn't. Why would he say, no, I don't want to play for any other team. I only want to stay with the Predators. Do what's best for you and your family and your future. So no definitive answer on what Pekka Rinne is doing in the future. My personal opinion is that he would not go to a different NHL team. If he does go to a different team, it would be in Finland.
I think he's
That's
allowed.
my personal opinion.
I think he's allowed to do it. I think he
can do whatever he wants.
I think he's earned the right to do whatever he wants, and nobody here be upset about it. If that's going to be from whatever team it's going to be, I'm okay with that. What's next?
And he also mentioned that Nashville is such a special city to him. His son was born here. This is where his family is located now. So, fun little update on Pekka. Also, some basketball news. Coach K announced today that he will be retiring as Duke's head basketball coach after 41 seasons. He's the second longest tenured Division I basketball coach. Became the head coach at Duke in 1980. So, Duke's head coach in waiting is John Shire. He's the lead recruiter on Jason Tatum, Zion Williamson. Brought in a ton of star power into Duke. So he will be the coach.
I thought
in
Benjamin
waiting.
Franklin was the lead recruiter on Zion Williamson, but I could be
Yeah,
wrong.
it could have been maybe a certain Rolls Royce or a certain car that did it.
I thought that it was.
But they're crediting this guy.
Okay.
So I'll
let me
just
say
go with
this.
what they say.
So I think this is an interesting thing. Roy Williams retires this year. Kay's retiring next year. I think that what we're going to see, the veteran coaches that have the money, they don't want to deal with the name, image, and likeness thing. It's like, I've made all my money. Oh, I definitely think I think it was Jeff Goodman that said that Kay was kind of winding down anyways, but then with the name, image, and likeness, Kay was like, I'm out of here. They do not want to deal with this. They do not want to deal with, oh, coach, I'm sorry I can't make it to practice. I have to make this Instagram post so I can make $38,000 today. I don't think they want to deal with it. I think that they want to leave that to the young coaches. I think the difference between Kay and Roy Williams is I think, Roy just, shucks, I'm out of here. I think Kay wants a year where everybody tells Kay how great he is. Let me say this. It's been a while since Kay's won anything. I think it's been 6 years since they won a national title, and that was that team with Jahlil Okafor and Justice Winslow and Tyus Jones that got lucky that Wisconsin beat Kentucky in the Final Four, because that Kentucky team is the best college basketball team I've ever seen. I mean, it's pretty crazy that at one point you had in the ACC Roy Williams coaching at North Carolina, Jim Boeheim in the Hall of Fame coaching at Syracuse, Mike Krzyzewski at Duke, Rick Pitino at Louisville, and now only Boeheim is left. And honestly,
I wouldn't be surprised if Boeheim was on the way out as well.
How much longer is Boeheim going to be there for? College basketball, I mean, it feels like we're losing interest in college basketball by the season. I think the fact that we know that the players get paid does not help. And I think this name, image, and likeness thing, these old coaches, I don't think they want to fool with it. I think it's bad enough, at least to let the assistant coaches deal with the money under the table. Now we have to have the head coach deal with the money over the table, and I don't think these old guys want to do it. And I think there's two reasons why they don't want to do it. Number one, it's a lot probably to deal with. Mm-hmm. But number two, and more importantly, I just think a guy like Kay doesn't think that's what college basketball is about. Now, no coach is going to come out here and say, we shouldn't pay the players, because then you'll lose any recruit that you were ever going to get. But I just think that Kay probably looks at it like, I don't want to deal with this in college basketball. This, to me, is not what college basketball is about. And you know what? More power to him. Congratulations to Coach KK. I mean, great career.
Such a great career.
And, it's a changing of the guard, I guess, in college basketball.
It
college
really
basketball
is.
just feels like it's just
It just feels like this massive turnover when you see these coaches who are monumental in the sport starting to retire, and just a change in culture, a change in coaching.
Like, who's the star coach in college basketball now? Jay Wright?
Jock Smart?
I mean, he got fired, didn't he?
Yeah.
Okay. Who's the star coach in college? I mean, seriously.
Tony Bennett?
So, exactly. Jason Fitz will join us next, ESPN Radio. I believe the Titans are trading for Julio. Does he? Next, Stillman Company, it's ESPN 102.5 The Game. Stillman Company is delivered by TriStar, moving ESPN 1025 The Game. Another day. Now we're past June 1st. Still Julio is a member of the Atlanta Falcons. Julio Jones, where is he going today? Kimberly Martin on ESPN NFL Insider said, go ahead and cross off the Rams, cross off the Ravens in the Julio Jones sweepstakes. And there is one team that she keeps hearing when it comes to her sources in the league. Here's what Kimberly Martin said on ESPN this morning.
Tennessee is a team that comes up in a lot of my conversations with executives, but any head coach will tell you this: you're playing with fire with Julio Jones. So you got to be sure that your team is literally just a Julio Jones away from making a lot of noise in the playoffs. Because if not, you're investing a lot of money in a guy who's 32.
And then the more I did research on it, the more I think that, yes, Julio makes a lot of money, but it's $17 million guaranteed over 2 years, and the Titans can move that money around. So perhaps it's not the $15 million cap hit that we look at on paper today. That leads me to believe that Julio Jones is going to be a Titan. I don't agree with it. I wouldn't trade for Julio, but it just seems like they're the team that won't go away. Jason Fitz joins us now, ESPN Radio, presented by Blood Assurance. Give blood, give local, save lives. Fitz, you said last week you thought this would be a huge move to make for the Titans. I'm just trying to read the tea leaves here. The one team that is always in the discussion on this is the Titans. Do you think Julio Jones ends up with Tennessee?
Yeah, I do. And I'll be honest. I've asked the insiders that I think would be plugged in to know, and that what Kimberly Martin just said, it reflects everything I've been told, that the Titans are a very real part of this conversation. Now, I don't necessarily believe some of the hype that we've seen from reports talking about the concern of other teams swooping in and, overpaying for it. I think what we're seeing right now is a game of chicken on what the actual value is going to be. And I think at the end of the day, it's going to get done. And I think likely it's not going to take a first-round pick to get it done. I think, a second-round pick is going to send Julio Jones to the Titans, where they'll have to absorb the money. But I will continually say till I'm blue in the face, teams figure money out, Stillman. So I just don't think the money's as big a deal as it's made out to be in these situations.
Certainly, somebody that is in the know told me basically it's $17 million over the next 2 years for Julio. You can spread it out. So whoever trades for Julio is probably going to rework that deal. And instead of $15 this year, probably gives him a $10 million signing bonus that's spread out over the next 3 years. And then you give him, you split up the rest of that money, the rest of the $7 million, and that's what you're on the hook for. So you could get a Julio for about a $5 million cap charge. This is my theory, though, Fitz. And I've seen it now with the Tannehill trade. I saw it with the Derrick Henry negotiation last year. I think you can argue that we've seen this all the way back to the DeMarco Murray trade with John Robinson, which is I think he sets a price and says, this is what I'm willing to pay. And if you get a better deal, Jack Conklin, or you get a better deal, Jonnu Smith, go take it. But this is what I'm willing to pay. And ultimately that leads to these great trades like he had with Philadelphia for DeMarco Murray, or even the Clowney deal last year when we were hearing Clowney wanted $17 million and $20 million, and he wanted all in at $12.5. And I think that Robinson does that. I think he's done that with Atlanta, and now Atlanta is just trying to either get Tennessee to raise their offer or get a better offer. And I'm not sure Robinson's going to budge.
Yeah, I don't think he's going to. A really good analysis by you, by the way. And I'll say this also. He's been right. GMs are a very tight-knit group, and I've learned this a lot working so much with Mike Tannenbaum. You talk about sort of the inner circles of how things work, and he'll tell you that relationships matter between these guys, and having an understanding that, everybody's out to do what they need to do for themselves, but also you're not going to get jobbed over in the process is real, and what you said makes a lot of sense. I'd also add that John Robinson has given a fairly reasonable market value to the transactions you mentioned. He's sort of looked at it and said, it's like having a real estate agent that looks at it and says, I don't care what everybody else tells you your house is worth. It's actually really worth this. And they're right more often than not. So everybody in the process can look at it and say, okay, the transactions you just mentioned have all obviously worked. I would also argue that everybody can look back at it a few years later and say, okay, I understand how that trade happened, why that trade happened, and why that was about the right value for it. So I think it's a win-win situation, but it also speaks to the relationships John Robinson has and the way he does business. And by the way, I have no problem with that. Like, if you want to come in and say, hey, here's my final offer, like, this isn't Madden and it's not eBay. So often we go into eBay, you're bidding on something and you think, okay, this is the most I'll pay. And then you get really close to that time. And next thing you know, you're like, I paid how much for that? And you have buyer's remorse. The Titans don't often have a lot of buyer's remorse.
Jason Fitz is our guest, ESPN Radio, presented by Blood Assurance. Give blood, give local, save lives. Mike Tannenbaum and Jeff Saturday this morning on Get Up said they think the Titans are real contenders with Julio Jones. You said last week, put them right there with Buffalo, below Kansas City if they add Julio Jones. Here's my question to you, Fitz. Julio Jones, A.J. Brown, Josh Reynolds in the slot, Derrick Henry at running back. Is Ryan Tannehill good enough to win a Super Bowl with that crew?
Without question. And look, we got to have two different Super Bowl conversations, realistically. So often we look at it and say, well, the Peyton Mannings and the Tom Bradys are what you need to win a Super Bowl. Well, over the last generation, the two best players in the game have won a lot of Super Bowls. I'm not going to argue that at all. But let's also look back further than that. I mean, you go back over the last 15 years, you've seen a Joe Flacco win a Super Bowl. You've seen Eli Manning win a couple of Super Bowls. You've seen Brad Johnson win a Super Bowl. Like, you can be a pretty good quarterback that gets hot at the right time, that doesn't make a lot of mistakes, and win a Super Bowl. And that absolutely would fit the mold of where Ryan Tannehill is. The Titans don't have to have a top 5 quarterback in the NFL to win a Super Bowl. They have to have a top 10 quarterback, and he is absolutely that without question. And if he's on fire, he can be even better than that. So, yeah, I have no problem at all saying that Ryan Tannehill can be a Super Bowl winning quarterback for Tennessee.
Woo! That's where I couldn't go. And I love Tannehill. I do. I couldn't get there on Tannehill. The playoff game last year against the Ravens, they sold out to stop Derrick Henry. He threw for 165 yards, an interception at the end. I couldn't get there on Tannehill. The other side is the defense. It's a totally different defense personnel-wise. But is this defense good enough to compete with, even if you add Julio Jones, Fitz?
No, and that's the big thing. Like, the defense is only good enough if you apply benefit of the doubt. And, you know, for me, this is what everybody does right now. Everybody is a fan, and I do this myself. Everybody knows I'm a Raiders fan. So this is the time of the year where I find myself looking at the Raiders, and all of a sudden I'm looking at the Raiders with this, Henry Ruggs is going to take this big step forward, and, these draft prospects are going to work out. Like, which what we all do. We presume that every move by our favorite team is going to work out, and then every move by the other teams in our division are not going to work out. If you apply equal benefit of the doubt across the board to everybody in the AFC South, I still don't see how this defense, even if everybody turns out to be a home run in the way they've got them, and suddenly the defense can turn around, I don't think this defense is good enough to win a Super Bowl. No, and this defense is going to have to play lights out for them to be into that conversation, because there is a talent gap still between Kansas City and Tennessee as things stand today. So, for me, the defense is the big question mark. Can guys actually develop fast? Because you don't have a huge, long window of 5 years of, okay, don't worry, we're going to figure this out. Like, the Titans are in a window right now, which means this defense needs to play better right now. Otherwise, we're going to be looking back at this team in 3 years saying, how did they not do better?
Jason Fitz is our guest, presented by Blood Assurance. Give blood, give local, save lives. I have a new rule on the show that we believe in Jeff Darlington around here. So if Darlington says it, we believe it. Just because I think the history of Jeff Darlington over the last couple of years has been so right. Darlington said a couple of weeks ago, which, by the way, I would assume, Fitz, you're on board with, right?
Oh, yeah, Darlington's not only a great insider, he's a great dude. So, I'm all in.
So Darlington said a couple of weeks ago that he doesn't think anybody's giving up a first for Julio, and that he'd be surprised if it's a second. He thinks a third is probably more kind of in the realm of what they're going to be willing to give up. Mike Tannenbaum yesterday was asked about what he would do if he was Atlanta's GM. This is what Mike Tannenbaum had to say. Take a listen.
Mike Tannenbaum, you've always got answers for me here. If you're the general manager in Atlanta right now, tell me how this is playing out. What are you doing on the phones as you try to figure out how and when you're going to trade Julio Jones?
I'm taking a list of those teams that Dan just gave us, and I'm saying, I need your best offer by the end of the day today. And don't complain tomorrow that you would have done more when I trade him to Team X, because this is going to happen, and it's going to happen fast. And that's the only way I really can create a sense of urgency, and here's why. It's been so public that you simply can't tell another team, if we don't get the offer we like, he's going to come back and be a Falcon. That's off the table. So the best way to create a sense of urgency is, I need your final and best offer today.
So if that's the case, what's your final offer, your John Robinson, to the Falcons for Julio Jones?
Oh, final and best. I mean, I wouldn't have a problem giving up a second rounder, honestly. I truly wouldn't. But I think that John Robinson is a heck of a lot smarter than I am. I know that. So I wouldn't be surprised to see a third and a fifth. Let's say a third this year coming up and a fifth the year after.
Okay, so kind of right in line. Caroline yesterday went with a third and a fourth next year, or a fourth, I guess, in 2 years. 2023 would be the fourth.
Right.
I think the issue here is, this reminds me a lot, Fitz, of the Tannehill trade. And it wasn't a big deal at the time because Tannehill was a starter on his way out in Miami. But Tannehill, I think, had 2 years left on his deal. He was supposed to make $17 million. He changes his deal to a 1-year deal, $7 million. Miami pays $5 million of it. $2 million of it goes to Tennessee. Titans give up a 4th-round pick. Tannehill probably didn't want to take less money, but at least he got the benefit of being a free agent after the end of the year, and then he cashed in on it. Miami probably didn't want to pay the $5 million, but at least they got a 4th-rounder in return. And Tennessee didn't want to give up a 4th-rounder, but they needed insurance for Mariota. I think this is the same way, where Julio's going to have to give up a little bit, Atlanta's going to have to give up a little bit, and the Titans are going to have to give up a little bit. Do you see all three sides willing to give in a little bit here?
I do. I think the one thing, though, we have to remember is that teams, when they're trading, really do look at where they think those picks are going to be. And that's such an under-talked about portion of it. So understand that a third and a fifth from the Titans, for example, is not as strong an offer if you're the Falcons as a third and a fifth from a team that's not as good as Tennessee. So that's the one concern I have will Tennessee have to put a little bit more on the table simply because their 3rd-round pick is likely going to be, their hope would be, and I think Atlanta would agree, that it would be a pick near the bottom of the 3rd round, as opposed to a team that decides that they're going to give up a pick near the top of the 3rd round. So that's the one variable I think that sort of could mess this up and could pressure the Titans to put a little bit more into the kitty, because not all 3rd-round picks are equal. But outside of that, yes, I think everything else you just laid out is absolutely feasible.
Jason Fitz, ESPN Radio. He's one of the best. Presented by Blood Assurance. Give blood, give local, save lives. Fitzy, appreciate you. We'll talk next week. Maybe Julio will be a Titan then.
You're the best, my friend. I can't wait. Appreciate you.
Yep, Jason Fitz joining us on the program. I mean, I really was, as I was waiting when he was like, I'd give up a 2nd-round pick, but a 3rd and a 5th. I was literally about to say to him, well, I just want you to know that I'm firing you and I'm hiring Caroline. Like that, because Caroline yesterday was going to go with a 3rd and a 4th in 2023, and I like that more than do a 2nd-round pick. A 2nd-round pick.
Second is high.
A 2nd-round pick for me for Julio Jones is a non-starter.
2nd-round pick is Derrick Henry.
It's A.J. Brown.
It's A.J. Brown.
It's Roman Yossi.
Roman Yossi.
2nd-round picks are a big deal around here. 615-737-1025. Two things Fitz said that really rang a bell with me. We'll get to those next. Stillman Company, we're live from the wholesaling studio, powered by RumbleOn.com. It's ESPN 1025 The Game.
It's Tennessee, Greeny, because they've lost a couple of good players. Corey Davis, John Smith, a really productive pass receiving tight end. If they could pair Julio Jones with A.J. Brown, they still have Derrick Henry and a very productive Ryan Tannehill. Julio Jones very well may tip the balance in the AFC and close the gap between Tennessee and Kansas City. They need to be explosive on offense because they have some younger pieces on defense. Julio Jones could be consequential to the Titans.
There you go. That was Mike Tannenbaum, former NFL general manager on ESPN Today. We just had Jason Fitz on. Two things Fitz said that somewhat stand out to me. First, and I was a little surprised by this. First, I was a little surprised by the fact that Fitz thinks you can win a Super Bowl with Ryan Tannehill. So I asked the question, do you think you can win a Super Bowl if you have Julio Jones, A.J. Brown, Derrick Henry, and Ryan Tannehill? And Fitz said yes. Now, I would agree. The one thing I would say is this, which is there are a lot of quarterbacks who can win Super Bowls that don't win Super Bowls. Now, I'm not saying that Joe Flacco, like when I mean can you win a Super Bowl, I'm talking about not Joe Flacco. Like Joe won a Super Bowl, but you can't really win a Super Bowl. Like the prototypical Joe Flacco cannot win a Super Bowl. That being said, I don't think you have to be the best quarterback in the league every year in order to win a Super Bowl. I think it's a lot like the NBA, where LeBron's team is normally somewhere around there. This year it's going to be the super team with the Nets, with KD and Kyrie and James Harden. And like that, those teams are always going to be there. But then there's going to be a team like last night's Portland Trailblazer team because Damian Lillard goes bananas. Or a couple of years ago, Kawhi Leonard went nuts and Toronto won the championship. So I think you can do that in the NFL. I just look at the playoffs over the last couple of years. And when things don't go your way with Derrick Henry, Tannehill in the two games against good teams, but every team you play in the playoffs is going to be good. And any team you play in the Super Bowl, you assume would be pretty good. When things don't go your way with Derrick Henry, Tannehill can't win you those games. Now, the argument for Tannehill would be, yeah, but he hasn't had a Julio freaking Jones. Now, again, 32-year-old Julio is not the same as 26-year-old Julio, and that has to be noted as well. But I'm kind of in the middle when it comes to if you add Julio, is Tannehill good enough to win you a Super Bowl? The other thing Fitz said that stood out to me was he does not believe the Titan defense can win a Super Bowl. Now, again, there's a lot of new faces. Danico Autry is in. Daquan Jones is out. Jadeveon Clowney is gone. Bud Dupree is in. You bring back Jayon Brown from injury, and your entire secondary outside of Kevin Byard is almost brand new. So it's a different defense. I do share the concern, though, that Fitz has that we've been spending all of our time, ever since they signed Bud Dupree, we've spent all of our time just saying offense, 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 offense. And talking about the slot wide receiver, tight end, things of that magnitude, without being realistic of did they really do enough to improve the defense? They made a cryptocurrency investment with their first-round pick. I have no idea if Caleb Farley's going to be healthy. Then you've got Bud Dupree. He's coming off of an injury. And when he wasn't in a contract year in Pittsburgh, his results were a little questionable. Now, Danico Autry, yes. But I go back to this, which was Fitz does not think this defense is good enough to win the Super Bowl. What do we think?
I don't think that the 2020 Titans defense is good enough to win a Super Bowl. But, like you said, there are so many new faces, so I can't say that they can or they cannot. I can say that it'll be different, and I can say that it will most likely be better. The defense will.
Can't be worse.
It can't be worse. It wasn't great last year. So I cannot say definitively that, yes, that is a Super Bowl caliber defense, because you look at the Bucs defense from last year. Oh my gosh.
But the Bucs defense was good in 2019.
Yes, but I'm just saying that was a Super Bowl caliber defense because they shut down the Chiefs.
But was it a Super Bowl caliber defense in 2019 when they had all the same players?
I guess so, if they had all the same players. But, I mean, I'm just saying, like, that is a Super Bowl caliber defense.
Well, yeah, but it's easy to say that the team that won the Super Bowl has a Super Bowl caliber defense.
Well, yeah, because it was a really good defense.
But the bigger question is the Titans defense good enough to be one of those defenses that doesn't just jump off the page right away? Like, it's easy to say, well, hey, Kansas City's offense won a Super Bowl. We ain't working with Kansas City's offense over here. Like, I would say that Buffalo's offense, I think, is good enough to win a Super Bowl.
Yes.
Okay. That's where I look at Tennessee, and I say, okay, is this defense good enough to win a Super Bowl? If you've got a lot going for you on offense,
do you know?
Is it good enough?
Can you say confidently yes or no? Because I don't think that I would be able to.
I don't think anybody can say confidently yes or no right now about the Titans defense, but I lean a lot more towards no. I mean, you have to remember, I don't trust the coaching on defense.
That's
Bowen
another
today.
element, is Shane Bowen.
We talked to Shane Bowen today, and he's a lot better than Vrabel at how he does these press conferences. I mean, he at least said, a lot, but I still don't have a lot of faith in him calling these plays. And the reason I don't have a lot of faith in Shane Bowen is because, well, he's a Vrabel puppet. I mean, that's how it feels. I have talked to people that were on the team last year, and I said, what do you think about this coordinator? From somebody who would know. And he said, the big fear with the team is that he believes everybody thinks that it's just a Vrabel puppet and that Vrabel's basically going to have his hands too much in the pot. And just like Wesley Woodyard accused Vrabel of for why Dean Pease isn't here anymore, that's – I don't believe in Shane Bowen. I don't believe in Shane Bowen because I don't believe in Vrabel coaching as a coordinator. Vrabel is not a coordinator. I do not believe in that. When Vrabel was coordinator of the Texans, they were awful. When Vrabel had to coordinate that one game that Dean Pease got sick and went to the hospital, they were awful. Last year, with no definitive defensive coordinator until Vrabel told us it was Bowen and practically threw him under the bus, terrible. So I don't think Mike Vrabel is a good defensive coordinator. I have said that many times, and until I'm proven otherwise, that's all I have to go off of. Everybody that I know that will talk, it's like we were talking about the Predators players today and how we don't really believe 95% of the things they said, right?
Right.
Okay. When you're on the team, it's a lot harder to tell it like it is without alienating everybody or getting dumped or getting traded or whatever. And when you go to another team, you just want to go to another team and you just want things to be good going forward. You don't really want to worry about the team that you were on or burning bridges. Some people are, but most people aren't. Like Malcolm Butler, when he left New England, he didn't want to burn that bridge with Belichick. And he comes here, and we all knew there was drama between him and Belichick because why else would he have been benched in the Super Bowl? So you don't want to burn that bridge, and a lot of guys don't. But when you've got nothing to lose, like the guy I've talked to who's done with the NFL, or like Wesley Woodyard who came on this station and echoed those thoughts, and Wesley Woodyard is basically done with the NFL, when you can say what you want, you can kind of do whatever. And those guys have both said, one privately to me, another on the record in Woodyard, have said that the fear with Bowen is that he's a Vrabel puppet and that it's Vrabel overstepping the role of defensive coordinator. So I can't get on board with this defense until I'm assured that Mike Vrabel will keep his nose out of it. Mike Vrabel needs to coach the team. He does not need to get too concerned about the defense. He needs to coach the team. And I only say this because if he was good when he gets too concerned about the defense, then I'd be fine with it. But history has shown that he stinks at it, so I would just prefer you just motivate the guys, manage the game from the sideline, try to win a challenge every now and then, and just do the press conferences and hush. But I don't think that's what Vrabel's going to do. I think Vrabel's going to be all over it, so I don't have a ton of faith in the defense. And I'm sitting here thinking to myself, okay, if we're going to do all this Julio Jones talk, but we don't think the defense is good enough to win, then who gives a damn about trading for Julio Jones? Right?
Well, yeah, it's the same thing as we talk about during the draft of, okay, well, the Bengals should have drafted an offensive lineman to protect your investment in Joe Burrow. It's the same thing I think that applies here with the Titans is if you are going to invest in Julio Jones, you have to protect that team. If you're going to invest him to create a Super Bowl caliber team, then you need to invest in every single area.
Well, they've invested in the defense. The defense isn't very good. Or at least right now, we don't think it's good, and we don't trust the coach. 615-737-1025. We'll get your reaction, 615-737-1025. Plus, I did ask, speaking of defense, I did ask Shane Bowen what I think is the most important question about his tenure as coordinator. We'll get to that next. But this is the question for you at 615-737-1025, which is, do you believe in the defense? If you get Julio Jones, is this defense good enough to win with? 615-737-1025. Summer weather is here, and this is the time of year when your AC systems are working overtime. That's why you got to call my friends at Hiller Plumbing, Heating, Cooling, and Electrical, and I know them so well because they have done such a great job for me. If your unit is near the end of its lifespan or is starting to have trouble keeping your house cool enough, now is the time to replace it. My friends at Hiller are offering special financing on HVAC systems this summer, so get a new system installed and pay 0 interest for 60 months. Don't wait until you're uncomfortable. Go ahead and ensure you're ready for peak temperatures. Visit my friends at happyhiller.com for all of the details. As always, happy you'll be or the service is free. Hiller Plumbing, Heating, Cooling, and Electrical, proud supporters of the Nashville Predators and the Tennessee Volunteers. Hiller, call the Happy Face Truck today.
I think he's kind of coached me in this deal. He's brought me up through this profession in some regard. I think just looking back at the position groups when I had them, OLB-wise, some of the things we've done in the past year, even last year, some of the good, some of the bad, there was stuff. Obviously, we got to get corrected. But I mean, I appreciate his confidence in me. Again, just like all these players we talk about every day, like we work every single day to prove ourselves and to make this team better. Like regardless of the individual, whoever it is, like we're all in this together to do whatever we see fit or whatever's needed to find ways to win games in whatever fashion we got to do. We got to play better defensively. We do. I'm excited. I'm encouraged about where this thing's going right now. But again, I'm just like everybody else, man. I'm putting in the work day in and day out, trying to do everything I can to help this team win.
That was Shane Bowen, Titans defensive coordinator, that says, hey, Coach Vrabel's kind of brought me up. And that's what worries me. That's what worries me, is that Shane Bowen is kind of a Vrabel puppet. I know that sounds rude. Like, I think some people would say that that's rude. I don't know. Would you consider that to be rude? To say that he's a Vrabel puppet?
I wouldn't want to be called someone's puppet.
But does it not feel that way?
It does feel that way.
Okay. So that kind of bothers me a little bit. I see your phones on the defense. I do want to get to this, though. I think I asked Shane Bowen a pretty important question, because we can talk about Julio Jones and we talk about the offense and we talk about that. I've told you, I think Julio ends up here. I do. I've also told you, I would not do it because I don't think Julio puts you over the top. The one thing I think puts you over the top is a pass rush. Now, they've added Bud Dupree, and maybe Danico Autry will help a little bit with that as well. But I asked Shane Bowen, how do you have faith in the pass rush this year for something that has been an issue for a long time? Here's what he said.
When you guys add Bud Dupree, that's a big step. But how much, where is the faith coming from that the pass rush will be formidable this year?
Yeah, I mean, I got confidence in these guys as it goes. I think in training camp, it's hard right now, man. We're not really doing a whole lot with these OTAs. We're working individual, we're working techniques, but truly lining up and rushing against the O-line, it's a non-contact camp right now. So we're not really going to get a good gauge for what that's going to become. But I think we're excited about what Bud has done, what Danico has done, where Jeff's at, what Harold has done at times for us. And then we obviously got to develop a few more guys here to be able to go in there and execute and find ways to affect the quarterback. But I think that's something built over time. I hope all these guys have tremendous confidence in themselves and being able to get to the quarterback. I think that's a vital step to being a good player, is being able to play with confidence and know who you are and that you're going to get your job done and excel at your job. So I hope all of them individually have confidence. I can't speak for anybody outside this building, but I got confidence in them. I do. I can't wait until we get to the fall and we get to kind of put this thing together and see what it looks like.
I hope they have confidence in themselves, too. That's all I'll say about that. Let's go to your phone. 615-737-1025. Phone line driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com. Adam is going to kick us off this hour. Thank you for calling. Go ahead, Adam.
Shane Bowen sounded awful right there. That is such a terrible answer for a fan to hear. Well, all right, so here, I actually think they will be a lot better this year, and it's not because of that guy. It is because Jim Schwartz, and I've seen Jim Schwartz. I don't know what kind of role he's going to play. I just can't imagine, because a lot of the core pieces, Jeffrey Simmons and the linebackers and KB that kept one possession games, they're back. I think the corners have actually improved. They're not very deep. But I can't see Jim Schwartz watching bad habits and not at least saying something. And he finds a way to generate pressure, man. So I fully believe in him. So that's why I think it's actually going to be better.
Oh, my goodness, if they named Jim Schwartz. And we did this when they announced that Jim Schwartz, thank you, Adam, when they announced that Jim Schwartz was going to be part of the coaching staff. I said, if they just named him defensive coordinator, I would have loved it. But they weren't willing to name him defensive coordinator.
But I wonder, okay, no, he does not have the defensive coordinator title, but will he kind of almost be the defensive coordinator?
No. And see, that's why. Because if he was defensive coordinator, I would still have my reservations about it. Because I would say, okay, well, I hear that people, said that Vrabel clashed with Dean Pease, and because Vrabel clashed with Dean Pease, if he's going to be willing to step on Dean's toes, who is his coordinator, whose toes is he not going to be willing to step on? But when he doesn't name Schwartz the D coordinator, but he names him a senior advisor, but he names Bowen the coordinator, and we're talking about whether or not Bowen is a Vrabel puppet, that tells me Vrabel wants control of the defense. And I will say that I believe that Jim Schwartz will have a voice, but I think it will be minimized. And that's just an educated opinion. There is no sourcing on that. This is what I think of Vrabel. I mean, I just think that I think Mike Vrabel, and I like Mike Vrabel. Like, I really, really, really like Mike Vrabel. I have a lot of respect for Vrabel. I know that I rip his rear end a lot, but I'll just say this. Behind the scenes, I have a lot more respect for Vrabel because I think Vrabel's straight up a lot of the time. I have a lot more respect for Vrabel than I do for other people. And I will throw that out there. But I just think Vrabel is too hands-on when it comes to the defense. He's just too afraid because he thinks that he's the smartest guy in the room. He thinks he knows how to do this. And I do worry about that. Like, I think he's a good head coach. We always talk about people that are good coordinators but not good head coaches, right? Like Dick LeBeau was a legendary coordinator. All those years with the Steelers, he was great when he was here, Hall of Fame player, Hall of Fame coach. Do people remember when Dick LeBeau was head coach of the Cincinnati Bengals? Like, nobody ever talks about that. Dick LeBeau, legendary coordinator, at one point, head coach of the Bengals. It didn't go very well. Some guys are just meant to be coordinators. In Vrabel's case, I think he's just meant to be a head coach. And so I think that this season, and this is what I appreciate, which is kind of the moment of truth where you really find out. And I said this about the Predators and kind of their core and their management and their everything when we went into this season. I said, no expectations. I want to evaluate. Now, their evaluation and my evaluation is different. Their evaluation is that Poyle is doing a good enough job, and I'm guessing they're going to keep a lot of this group together. That's not my evaluation. But I think this year, with all the changes they've made on defense, and if they get a Julio Jones, I think it is a referendum on whether or not Vrabel can coach this defense, Bowen can coach this defense, Jim Schwartz can coach this defense without Dean Pease. Because they totally revamped the secondary. They paid big money for Bud Dupree. They paid a nice chunk of money for Danico Autry. So we're going to see. Then I think if you get Julio Jones, I think the referendum is on Tannehill. Can you win with Tannehill if he's got all these weapons, the best running back in the game, a number one in AJ, Julio on the other side, Josh Reynolds in the slot? Can you win? And I'm sure there will be, a wrench in there, an injury or something that'll give you the cop-out to say, well, but, and you can do that. But I'm just telling you, I feel like this year's the ultimate referendum on Vrabel and the defense and the way it's going. Because if the defense stinks this year, Shane Bowen's out. There's no way you can bring him back if the defense stinks this year. 615-737-1025 is our phone number. You have a thought?
No, go ahead.
Oh, well, you just looked at me like you were about to say something, and then I was like, okay, so
You go ahead. You run this ship.
615 said, well, I was running it to you.
No, I know. I appreciate it.
You want the ball on third down? I'll throw you the ball on third down. I'm looking around trying to say, oh, you want the ball? Okay, you want the ball?
I'll take it. I'll take to the end zone.
615-737-1025 is our phone number, 615-737-1025. We'll get a headline update with Caroline. That's next. Stillman Company right here on ESPN 1025. The game. Let me make sure I don't have anything important to tell the fine people about. By the way, I will be playing in the Charity Folds of Honor softball game tomorrow at First
The celebrity
Horizon
softball game.
I mean,
hey-o.
You can call it whatever you want.
Nashville Walk of Fame.
I would say that if there were 50 celebrities playing tomorrow, I am like 50th. I would have to assume.
Well, I'm not going to disagree with you. But
See, I was
think,
looking for you to disagree.
Oh, no. That's not what I'm
going
to do. No. I will agree with you, but I mean, hey, at least you're with the big dogs.
ESPN 94.9 is the home for Nashville Sounds baseball. We'll be on their field tomorrow. Tonight, the Sounds are on the road to take on the Charlotte Knights, the AAA affiliate of the Chicago White Sox. Pregame begins at 5:50. First pitch at 6:04. Sounds baseball on ESPN 94.9, presented by Farm Bureau Health Plans and 312 Pizza Company. Stillman Company, we're delivered by TriStar Moving. It's ESPN 102.5 The Game. Stillman Company at the top of next hour. I have my pros and cons for a Julio Jones trade. I came up with them this morning, and I've actually been a little swayed on the contract numbers, so maybe that'll change the pros and the cons again. I think the Titans are getting them, and if they don't get them, I'll be surprised. Hey, join Stars for their annual golf tournament, the Heart of Golf Classic, on Monday, June 14th at the Vanderbilt Legends Club. This event pulls together some of our community's most influential leaders and business people, so consider sponsoring a hole and have your investment in the hope, health, and connection of our young people be showcased. Registration to play is still available. The tournament is a scramble format with an 8 a.m. shotgun start. Breakfast and lunch will be provided. It's the Heart of Golf Classic for Stars Nashville on Monday, June 14th at the Vanderbilt Legends Club. For more information, stars.nashville.org or call 615-983-6805. Boy, that was a lot. Headlines with Caroline.
We're spanning the sports world. It's Headlines with Caroline on Stillman Company, right here on Nashville's best sports talk, ESPN 102.5 The Game and the Game Nashville app.
The lab results are in. Medina Spirits failed drug test confirmed. The Kentucky Derby winner.
Hold on, let me do this the right way. I'm sorry about this.
All right.
The the test results are in, and you are not the father.
You did fail the drug test.
There you go.
And everyone screams and cheers and dances. So, Medina Spirit won the Kentucky Derby, and the post-race drug test came back positive. They did a second one. It came back positive for more of the illegal substance that was originally in his system. I think it's a boy horse's system. And also the Hall of Fame trainer Bob Baffert, who was the trainer for Medina Spirit, will be suspended for 2 years by Churchill Downs, effective immediately. Now, Medina Spirit's Kentucky Derby win is not yet disqualified. If it is, it would go to the second place winner of the Kentucky Derby, Mandaloun, the horse that finished second. The decision on whether to disqualify Medina Spirit is up to the Kentucky Horse Racing Commission, not Churchill Downs. They're completing their investigation. It's ongoing, so we will hear more on that. The CEO of Churchill Downs came out and said that Mr. Baffert's record of testing failures threatens public confidence in thoroughbred racing and the reputation of the Kentucky Derby. Given these repeated failures over the last year, including the increasingly extraordinary explanations, we firmly believe that asserting our rights to impose these measures is our duty and responsibility.
Let me say this. I like Bob Baffert, the guy. Bob has been very nice to me over the years. Let me say it, because when you're on the air in Louisville, you interact with all these trainers and jockeys.
Horse racing capital.
Yeah. Now, I didn't really do much of that, but I was just there. So it was like, whatever. I like Bob. He got to go. He's got to go. He's got to go. He's like the Lance Armstrong of horse racing. I will give him credit because he has been a great trainer for a long time. But Bob, you got to go.
Yeah.
And it's one thing, I know this is going to sound weird, and maybe I'll get in trouble for this, but it's one thing to cheat like the Arkansas Derby or something like that. It's another thing to cheat the Kentucky Derby and win, right? It's one thing for Brady Anderson to have 56 home runs in a season. It's another thing for Barry Bonds to take Hank Aaron's record. It's a different thing.
It's different
just
ballpark.
Not right. It's just not right to cheat the Kentucky Derby.
Well, it's not right to cheat anything, but
I know,
on
but it's
horse
different.
racing's biggest stage. But also, from a different perspective...
Which, of course, by the way, gives you more incentive to cheat.
That's what I'm saying, is if you're going to cheat, why would you cheat the Arkansas Derby when you can cheat the Kentucky Derby and win? And
that is true.
Be on the highest stage and make more money.
If you're Bob Baffert and your legacy goes down the toilet to win the Arkansas Derby, don't you look like an idiot? So maybe I've changed my course there a little bit. But that being said, this has Barry Bonds and it has Lance Armstrong written all over it. And again, I like Bob, but Bob, you got to go. You got to go. You got to go.
It just starts to dampen the sport, and then if it continues to be a thing year after year, and most likely a Bob Baffert horse will be in conversation for the Kentucky Derby or any other big horse race, if he's involved, I start to take myself back. Because I don't want to watch a horse race that I will anyways. But it just starts to dampen the integrity of the sport.
But his legacy, though, has gone right down the toilet. What's next?
Sad. However, Tony Vitello, head baseball coach for the Tennessee Volunteers, was on Robbie and Rexford this morning talking about the difficulty of the Knoxville Regional. And a lot of people are saying that is probably statistically the most difficult regional. And he was asked about it. He said Wright State, the 4 seed that Tennessee will play in that first game in the Knoxville Regional, he said Wright State is not a 4 seed. And I knew virtually nothing about Wright State baseball this morning, did a little bit of research. 35-11 on the season. They won the Horizon League title by a total in the tournament 40-10 in 3 games. They outscored their opponents 40-10. In the championship game, they beat Milwaukee 21-3 in the title game. Now, no pun intended, but Milwaukee and the University of Tennessee are in a completely different ballpark. So, to say that they're not a 4 seed, maybe not in that Horizon League, but compared to the rest of the competition, Liberty, Duke, Tennessee, it's hard to say. But
okay, so I'm just going to stop you right there. I'm so tired of this crying. I mean, I have heard this now for 3 days. This crying from Tennessee baseball fans. And the coach is doing a little bit of it, and the media is doing a little bit of it.
I don't think the coach is doing a little bit of it.
It's just this teary-eyed of like, we got a bad draw in our own regional. I'm so sad that it's going to be so hard to win baseball.
Oh, please.
Nobody cares. cares.
Don't give me
Nobody
that.
Cares. Nobody cares.
If the Titans had a really tough schedule this year, you would say, oh, well, the Titans got a tough schedule. This isn't fair. This can't be a Super Bowl winning season.
When have I said that?
You haven't, but I'm saying you would.
I'm not one of those guys. See, I'm not. Now, I would have more sympathy for this than I would say, like, when your team doesn't get into the NCAA tournament. Like, my team was the last team out of the NCAA tournament this year. Should have played better. I'm not going to sit there and argue about quadrant 1 wins. Well, Michigan State only had one quadrant 2 victory this year, and the RPI said, nope, we got to play better. My baseball team didn't make the NCAA tournament this year. Came pretty close. They went 5-12 down the stretch. Guess what? Got to play better. Now, Tennessee played well this year. I'll give them that.
Well.
But I am not. You are not going to get me to give one flip about Liberty being too hard. Like, I don't care. Just play ball. I don't care. And I don't know many people who do care. I mean, it's just, oh, my God, it's just Wright State.
Tennessee baseball fans care, I'll tell you that.
Won the Horizon League, and I just so
I mean, don't count Wright State out. There are the Oral Roberts of the world that can shake things up, and that could very well be Wright State.
Oh, my God, the crying is just absurd. This is the way I ask this. Are you the number 3 team in the country?
Tennessee
you're
is,
Tennessee
yes.
baseball. You're the number 3 team in the country?
Yeah.
Okay. Then you should go beat Wright State. All right? If you're the 3rd best team, go beat Wright State. You didn't hear me to this point. Now, I was in 8th grade, so we're going to do it. But I wasn't complaining when the Titans got that nighttime game in Foxborough that was like minus 30 degrees. That's home field advantage in the NFL. Like, again, the crying. Because I have heard this in like 6 different spots. I heard Vince Ferrara on with the midday show yesterday, and he was talking about the fans crying about it. You just brought up Tony Vitello on Robbie and Rex Road. He was crying about it. I'm just so tired of the crying. Just be glad. Just be glad that you're the 3rd seed in this NCAA tournament. Go beat Wright State. Go get to a super regional. Go to Omaha and play Vandy, because that's what all of us casual fans want. We want
I would love
Tennessee.
that.
That's what we want. We want Tennessee and Vandy in Omaha, and we want, like, okay, you've arrived, Tennessee, go beat Vandy in Omaha. And if you beat Vandy in Omaha, then you know what? Vandy fans got to eat the crow, and they got to tip the caps to Tony Vitello and the Vols. But if you lose to Wright State and Liberty, and you cry me a river about it when Vanderbilt's in Omaha, no, sir. Joe, no, sir. The crying is just, Tony Vitello, you didn't build that program by crying about stuff. Stop crying. What's next?
Wow. I need a second.
I've just heard so much crying.
I know. You sound pretty fed up with it. I'm so sorry to add salt to the wound.
I don't care. We should not care.
I don't know. I feel like you care.
No, I care about the crying. I don't care about who they get drawn in the regional. Like, did they draw the Yankees in the regional? No, they didn't. They drew Liberty. All right, move on.
So, moving on from that, there have been a lot of players on Titans players on social media campaigning for Julio Jones. But yesterday, Taylor Lewan was campaigning for a new name. He tweeted, "Imagine if Delaney Walker made a comeback in the Titans. Hashtag favorite teammate." Delaney Walker responded, "For the boys." So, Delaney Walker, released by the Titans in March of 2020, didn't play in 2020. Could we see a Delaney Walker comeback in 2021?
So let me couch this like 6 different ways. 1, it ain't going to happen.
Okay.
2, he's not a starting caliber tight end. Like, if you bring in Delaney Walker, you're not bringing him in to be your starting tight end. The Titans need a starting tight end. He's got to work out with San Francisco. Last time I checked, they have a starting tight end in San Francisco. I heard he's pretty good.
He's pretty good, I think.
Yeah. So, that's the kind of team. I love Delaney Walker. I mean, I love Delaney both on the field and what he meant to the Titans. I love Delaney in the community and what he meant there. And I'll be honest with you, I love Delaney the guy. I did 2 Q&As with him for Pepsi. And
flex.
They were the most fun Q&As I've ever done. Like, anything where it's like, hey, we want you to do this, like the Tostitos, and it's all Frito-Lay or whatever, but the one we did at the draft was maybe a little bit more measured because there were a lot of people like at the draft downtown. It was like, come see Delaney Walker, and then like he and a fan made nachos, and I picked which nachos to like, and I obviously picked the fans' nachos over Delaney's nachos. And Delaney got mad, but we did one a couple years ago for Pepsi, where it was I had no idea what to expect, and this guy just emails me like a straight up cold call email, and is like, "Hey, would you like to host the Delaney Walker Q&A for Pepsi?" And I was like, "Sure." And then the guy was like, "We're going to pay you X amount of dollars." And I was like, "Oh, okay, yeah, cool, right on." Like I was just thinking I was just going to go just do this.
Yeah, I mean, that'd be fun to just do.
I thought they
Sans
said just do it.
payday.
So I didn't know what to expect. It was in like a pizza restaurant, like just like a reserved room in a pizza restaurant. There's just pizza everywhere.
Interesting.
And like a Pepsi backdrop for you to take pictures in front of. And it's me and Delaney, and we're just sitting there in front of like just random people who like entered in the QR code on a like Frito-Lay product at a Twice Daily. And by entering in the QR code, you were registered to win this Chalk Talk with Delaney
Like
Walker.
one of those things at the bottom of the receipt
Yes.
that's like fill out the survey for
Right.
$100.
So it's like just random people. But it actually was like more fun. Like I thought it was going to be like a corporate thing or like, like, oh, these are like Pepsi VIPs.
Right.
Or, it was just like, it was so much fun. And Delaney had broken his ankle. And he was up there, and he was telling it like it is. And you know us on this show, we are proponents of telling it like it. Delaney was telling it like it is, where I was
love
like,
that.
I remember when we were like talking, and I was like, yo, like, Delaney, like, that's great. And I'm a proponent of telling it like it is. But
calm down over
like,
there, Delaney.
But so much so that before we did the thing with the draft with Frito-Lay, his PR person was backstage with us, and it was weird. It was like a green room, but it was like at the Titans stadium, like in the parking lot. It was very weird. It was like they created a green room or something. And so we were just watching the draft. It was like me and one of my buddies and Delaney and like his PR people and then all these people from Pepsi. And we were just sitting there, and I was like, hey, by the way, like last time we did one of these Q&As, you mentioned this. Don't mention
Don't do that again.
And Delaney's PR person just looks at us because she wasn't there at the first one. She goes, you did what? And Delaney's like, I was just kind of keeping it real. So I am totally in favor of bringing Delaney Walker back just because I love Delaney Walker. But as far as would Delaney Walker help the Titans, I mean, again, like they need a starting tight end today. Those are headlines with Caroline. Coming up next, I have my pros. I have my cons on the Titans acquiring Julio Jones. As I said, I think the Titans are going to acquire Julio Jones. But I think with all things in life, there are pros, there are cons, and I think we need to address them, and we'll do that next. Stillman Company right here, delivered by TriStar Moving. It's ESPN 102.5 The Game. Stillman Company is delivered by TriStar Moving, ESPN 1025 The Game. Caroline Fenton is here. Ian is here. In life with everything, there are pros and there are cons. When you buy a house, there's a pro and there are cons. The house, hey, I love the house. It's a big house. It's a nice house. The cons, your property taxes just went up. Do you know how expensive it is to maintain a nicer house? More house, more problems. We've heard that term before, right?
A lot to clean.
It's a lot. There's a pro and a con for everything. The Titans are firmly in the mix for Julio Jones. They're the one team whose name won't go away. In fact, Kimberly Martin, ESPN insider on Get Up this morning, basically said two of the teams we've been hearing pumped, cross them off the list. They're out. Here was her update this morning on the Julio Jones sweepstakes.
The sticking point really is the compensation, the age, and the health of this player. A lot of teams would like to add him, but how much are you going to give up? You know, I actually found out that the Ravens and the Rams, two teams that make sense on paper, you can cross them off the list of potential landing spots. So, you know, execs that I talk to around the league are skeptical that the Falcons are going to be able to get a 2022 first-round pick. In fact, a GM I spoke to last night said he would give up a third for Julio Jones.
So obviously teams are more skeptical than everybody that's called this show and just said, he's a Hall of Famer, go get him. So I put together pros and cons. The first pro for Julio Jones, if they were to acquire him. The Titans, on paper, would have one of the best offensive skill groups in the NFL. Maybe the best if they keep Josh Reynolds in the slot. So think about Tampa Bay with Evans, Godwin, Leonard Fournette, Antonio Brown, Rob Gronkowski. But again, AB, Gronk, not the same as the AB and Gronk of the past. But Evans and Godwin are pretty good. And then they've got Fournette. That's pretty good. Maybe that's better than Henry, Brown, Julio, and Josh Reynolds.
I don't know.
Kansas City with Kelsey, Tyreek Hill, Le'Veon Bell. I'm trying to think of who else is there. I mean, those three pretty much. You know, everybody else is complimentary off of that. Like Hardeman. Would Hardeman be good on another team? Maybe not. But because Hardeman's on that team and he can just run straight and Mahomes will throw it 55 yards, maybe that works. So Kelsey, Hill, and Bell in Kansas City, unless I'm forgetting somebody.
Sammy Watkins?
No, he's gone. Green Bay's got Devontae Adams, and that's it. I mean, one of the biggest issues with Green Bay is that it is just Devontae Adams. So Devontae Adams, Robert Tonyan. I mean, I think that if the Titans were to acquire Julio Jones on paper, you would have them as one of the 3 or 4 best offensive skill set teams in the league. Now, people would argue, and I don't know if the Cowboy inflation is a part of this, but people would argue on behalf of Dallas with Amari Cooper, CeeDee Lamb, Michael Gallup, and Zeke Elliott. But I'd rather take the Titan group, if Julio's in there, than take the Cowboys group. I don't even think it's that close. So I really think it's between you, Tampa Bay, and Kansas City, unless I'm forgetting somebody. But that is definitely a pro. My first con. This really puts the pressure on Tannehill. If you can't win, and again, Julio is 32, so he's not going to be what he was at 26. That offense that won Matt Ryan an MVP, where they had Mohamed Sanu, I believe, and they had Julio, and I think they had somebody else, and they had, you know, a good running game with the 2 running backs, Tevin Coleman and Devontae Freeman. Like, that Julio is gone, and you're not trading for that Julio. That Julio doesn't get dealt. That Julio is the highest paid guy in the league, and nobody bats an eye at him being the highest paid guy. You're not getting that Julio. But the name Julio Jones carries a lot of weight that I think if the Titans were to go into the playoffs this year and Ryan Tannehill was to throw for 165 and 1 touchdown like he did in the Raven game last year, then I think you'd see a lot of people that were saying, whoa, Tannehill couldn't get it done with this group. We just said it's them in Tampa Bay and maybe Kansas City as the best offensive skill team in the league. if they make this move. That's a lot of pressure on Tannehill. So I think that that's a con, though it could be a pro ultimately because it tells you what you have. Pro. Defenses are going to have to pick their poison. Now, I don't exactly know how this works, but there is something to the idea of you can't focus all on AJ if you've got Julio on the other side. You can't just load the box for Derek if you've got Julio on the other side. I mean, at this point, and I still really believe in Josh Reynolds. And I know that, everybody doesn't know a ton about him. And I heard, Pro Football Focus yesterday said, he's a 4 or a 3 or whatever. Maybe. I'd like to give him the chance to be a 2. But you put him in there, you really got to pick your poison. And I've heard a lot of good things about Des Fitzpatrick. And Ferkser is a factor catching the ball. So I really think if you're a defense, it's like, oh, good Lord, what are we going to do? We're already worried about Derrick Henry. And A.J. Brown, if he's in man coverage, catches the ball, throws the DB off, he may go 85 yards with it for a touchdown. Now we got to worry about Julio Jones. So I think that's a pro. Con, the Titans have no margin for injury across the board. They have no depth. Wide receiver, after Josh Reynolds, it's Des Fitzpatrick or Cam Batson. Quarterback, it's Logan Woodside. Running back, it's Darrington Evans. Tight end, it's Jeff Swaim or an undrafted Jared Pinkney that I think was on the practice squad last year. We already know about offensive line, and the defense doesn't have a ton of depth either. So basically, outside of the middle linebacker position, the Titans can't afford a big injury anywhere. And this is the NFL. And we know in the NFL that injuries are likely. But if you do this with Julio, it's going to eat up a lot of money. And if you do that, the idea of, oh, so-and-so got hurt, let's sign somebody, let's trade for somebody in the middle of the season to come in, just isn't going to work because you spent the money on Julio. So I think that that's a con. You've got no margin for error. One of the pros here, we're going to be able to figure out how good Tannehill is. But if you completely restructure Tannehill's deal, you're going to commit to him for longer. Big cap charges, $42 million next year. So you may restructure Tannehill's deal, work out the deal in order to get Julio in, and then you're going to find out how good Tannehill is. We had Jason Fitz on earlier today on the show. Fitzy said he thinks Tannehill's good enough to win a Super Bowl. I'm worried that even with the best weapons, Tannehill's one step short, maybe like Donovan McNabb, where he's one step short of being able to win you a Super Bowl. But once you've restructured his deal, you're committed to him. I'd like to know right now if I can win the Super Bowl with Ryan Tannehill before restructuring his deal, but you're going to figure that out if you do it, so I consider that to be a pro. Con, Julio's on the wrong side of 30 and coming off of a big injury that you never want an old man at that position to have. And I hope people understand that. That it's bad enough to be on the wrong side of 30 in the NFL. It's bad enough to be on the wrong side of 30 in pro sports. That's one thing. It's another thing to be on the wrong side of 30 and have a leg injury. Because now you're a receiver and you're old and you have that kind of leg injury. That's not good. Then you're expensive on top of it. It's a risk. Just like Kimberly Martin said, you're playing with fire. It is a risk. So for me, I would be a little worried about that injury, more worried than I feel like the Titan fans are. Hamstrings, man, those are tough. Once you get those, you worry that they're coming back. Another con is there's no looking back if the Julio experiment doesn't work. So if you try this and you make the trade, a third-round pick for Julio, you move some money around, but again, it's $17 million guaranteed over the next 2 years. You don't have any breathing room against the cap for the next 2 seasons, and there's no looking back. It's not like the Clowney thing where it's like, well, we tried on the Clowney thing, but it didn't work out, so moving on. Nope. You do this and it doesn't work out, somebody's probably losing their job. It may be both Robinson and Vrabel. I don't know. This town is apparently this is the weirdest town in America when it comes to firing a coach. I mean, I've never seen anything like it. So I do feel like it's a big risk. And that's where the pros meet the cons. And for me, now a lot of this, again, is how the money ultimately shakes out. And if you can get Julio to take a pay cut, I think that's going to be a big step in the right direction. But I wouldn't do it. That having been said, I think they will do it. 615-737-1025 is our phone number. We'll get to your reaction. We'll get to your calls. 615-737-1025 plus Tim Hasselbeck. Everybody at ESPN loves the idea with Julio with the Titans. Tim Hasselbeck, not so sold. We'll get into that as well. 615-737-1025 is our phone number. Stillman Company, we're live from the wholesaling studio, powered by RumbleOn.com. Right here on ESPN 1025 The Game. 615 day is coming up. It is around the corner. But this year just feels so weird. ESPN 1025 The Game and the Nashville Predators will host a 615 day celebration presented by Social Furniture at Ford Ice Center, Bellevue, June 15th, benefiting the Boys and Girls Clubs of Middle Tennessee. This all-day event will feature fun for the whole family while paying tribute to Nashville's annual 615 Day, an occasion that pairs Music City's area code with the date of June 15th. For more details, visit thegamenashville.com. Stillman Company, we're delivered by TriStar Moving. It's ESPN 1025 The Game.
It's Tennessee, Greeny, because they've lost a couple of good players. Corey Davis, John Smith, a really productive pass receiving tight end. If they could pair Julio Jones with A.J. Brown, they still have Derrick Henry and a very productive Ryan Tannehill. Julio Jones very well may tip the balance in the AFC and close the gap between Tennessee and Kansas City. They need to be explosive on offense because they have some younger pieces on defense. Julio Jones could be consequential to the Titans.
There you go. That was Mike Tannenbaum this morning on ESPN. And I was watching ESPN this morning, and I felt like everybody was just saying Titans, Titans, Titans.
That never happens.
No, never. But talking about how if they get Julio Jones, it's a total game changer. It's a this, it's a that. We had Fitz on last week, and we have Fitz on today. But we had Fitz on last week, and Fitz was like, yes, it's a total game changer. Yes, 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 yes. And then I'm listening to Tannenbaum this morning. Yes, 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 yes. Ian, if you could, Jeff Saturday this morning. Just yes, 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 yes. Here's what Jeff Saturday said.
Let's go there, Jeff Saturday. If you put Julio Jones on the Tennessee Titans, and he mentions it, Tannehill, Henry, Brown, now Julio, what does that team become in your opinion, Jeff?
A true contender. And listen, and really it all sets up off of Derrick Henry because you have to bring 8 guys down the box, sometimes 9 to stop the run game because you know Tennessee stays committed to it. And what does that mean for Julio and A.J. Brown? That means man coverage on the outside. When you think about Julio and the ability to practice, if he does stay banged up the way he has the past couple seasons, it's going to be difficult to get a ton of reps with Tannehill. So if at least you get man-to-man coverage, you know Julio's really good at that, of getting open, of making plays on off-script type plays when the quarterback has to move. We know Tannehill's got nice athleticism getting outside the pocket. So it will be a nice benefit for Tennessee.
So even he was saying it, and I thought, man, does everybody at ESPN sign a contract that says you have to say Julio Jones is going to make the Titans a difference maker? And then I heard Tim Hasselbeck today on Darren, Donick, and Chase doing his weekly hit. They asked him, what do you think about Julio to the Titans? Would you do it? Here's what Tim Hasselbeck said today on DDC.
What would you do if you were John Robinson? Let's say you were able to work out the particulars. Is this a move you think is a good idea moving forward? Would you pull the trigger?
I don't think I would. I think there are some spots that are a better situation for Julio, and I think the compensation that you're going to be competing with is probably more than I would want to do, especially there's a true number one in Tennessee. His name is A.J. Brown. He's essentially, Julio Jones, whatever, a decade ago. I mean, I think he's physically talented. He's fast. He can be. I mean, he's a dominant receiver. So I don't think that I would, especially if you're talking about paying Julio $15 million this year or around that. I would not do that. So, and then I think you look at other teams, and not that it's the New England way to give up a high draft pick for Julio Jones, but I think they would absorb, paying him. He's their number one right away. I think you make the argument he's the number one in San Francisco. I think you can make the argument that Seattle, needs to do things to make Russell Wilson feel like, his opinion is valued so they don't end up in a situation like Green Bay finds themselves in right now. So I think there are other spots, and I think that means you would compete with those spots, and that's why I wouldn't see it. Not that he wouldn't be a helpful player, but I wouldn't see it for the Tennessee Titans.
What do we think about Hasselbeck? Basically saying he thinks that there is going to be a bidding war as far as Julio is concerned. Now, I am skeptical about a bidding war for Julio Jones. It doesn't feel like a bidding war when it comes to Julio Jones. We've been through bidding wars, right?
Why do you not think it's a bidding war?
Because I think Atlanta would have pulled the trigger if it was a bidding war. I think Atlanta would have made the deal right now if they had if the prices were escalating and they were in the favor of Atlanta the way Atlanta wants it. I think Atlanta would make a deal by today. I think if there was a good deal on the table, Atlanta would have executed it last night. And I think right now, the longer this goes on, the more I think there are teams that are too skeptical or not willing to pay the price that Atlanta really wants for Julio Jones.
Unless Atlanta is starting to get more and more and better offers for Julio, and they're waiting to see who can get higher.
How often do you really see that, though, right? Like the first day of free agency, don't we always see the best contracts go off the board like that?
Yeah.
Like last year, Jonnu Smith for that $50 million. Mega deals. And this, it's like it's taken time, and I just don't think that if you had the offers you wanted, then I think he'd be out.
Do you think
Now,
if Atlanta has been offered a first, they would have taken it by now?
That's the other thing. This is where this goes back to why I don't think there's a huge bidding war here.
Mm-hmm.
And that is because remember the Rossini report last week about Atlanta's got a first-round pick on the table. And Corey Curtis brought up an interesting point to me that I hadn't thought about. But what if Atlanta was offered a 1 if they wanted a 2 or a 3 or a 2 and a 3 back as part of the compensation? So, like, we'll give you a 1 for Julio, but you guys send a 2 back. Then, okay, I guess that kind of makes sense.
Yes, technically there is a 1 on the table,
Right.
but it's not just a clear-cut 1 for Julio.
Right. But that could be what Atlanta's talking about.
Right.
So, I don't know.
Which
Again,
they're not wrong. They did get a first on the table, if that's the case.
It reminds me last year when we heard all those reports that Clowney was offered like $17 million by Cleveland and turned it down. I just don't believe that.
Yeah.
Like, I just don't. And I'm not doubting the reporting. I think it was Charles Robinson, who goes on Robbie and Rexroad every week. I think it was him who reported it. And I'm not doubting Charles Robinson's reporting. He's a great reporter. But Clowney was never offered $17 million last year and then took $12.5.
If
Like,
he was
that's
taken
bull
7,
crap.
if he was offered 17 and he denied it, it's not. There's something else going on there. There were
Right.
conditions.
And it was Cleveland who offered him the 17.
And now he's in Cleveland.
Reportedly, and now he took 10 this year? Like, again, so I don't believe that. And that's why if Atlanta had been offered a first-round pick for Julio Jones, I think the deal would have been made last night. Because now we're post-June 1. So now it's legit. And I think it would have been made. So I would disagree with Hasselbeck. I mean, again, the proof will be in the pudding. You do wonder if that Shannon Sharp kind of, the escapades there really cut Atlanta's legs out from under him. I mean, what Shannon did was probably illegal. What he did was horrible for Atlanta as far as the, bargaining power is concerned. But I do feel like Atlanta's not getting those great offers. Now, I do think, we talked about the dumb teams and how the dumb teams love to make the moves, and it would be very on brand for some dumb team like the Raiders or Washington or the Jets or somebody like that to jump up there and make a trade for Julio. So I can't rule that out, but I don't know. It just seems more and more likely that the Titans have given their final offer on Julio. They did it probably a week ago, and right now Atlanta's trying to see if there's something better out there. And that's ultimately why I think they're going to end up. And that would then kind of shoot down the Hasselbeck theory, which is you're not going to end up with Julio Jones on the Titans because somebody else is going to see the name and they're going to outbid it. And yet here I am saying this is going to be like Clowney last year, where there's all this talk, but there's really not all that interest. And even the Kimberly Martin clip we played earlier this hour, she kind of hints at that. At the fact that, hey, one general manager I talked to said he'd offer a third-round pick. And a third-round pick looks bad for Atlanta if that's what they end up doing. So I don't know. But Hasselbeck says no because they already have A.J. Brown as a number 1. And I was surprised by that.
Were you surprised that he said it? Or were you surprised?
I was surprised that he said it. I agree with it. I was surprised he said it.
I was about to say, yes, because A.J. Brown, to me, in my eyes, is the clear number 1.
It's funny because I don't think A.J. Brown's an elite wide receiver yet. I still think there's another step for him to take.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I still think that, when you're talking about Stephon Diggs or you're talking about Tyreek Hill or you're talking about, those kind of players, there's like another level. And A.J. hasn't gotten there yet. But I would say at this point of Julio's career, like him being a true number 1, I just don't see that one anymore. 615-737-1025. We'll get to your reaction on the Julio news today. Again, 615-737-1025. As the Julio turns, we're living in his world. We're just all here, I guess, for it. 615-737-1025. Stillman Company. We're delivered by TriStar Moving. It's ESPN 1025, The Game.
Look, I think if you're going to pay a receiver at that age of his career $15 million per season, yeah, like you're making a run at winning it all. I mean, that's the. I think if you're doing that, especially when you maybe had chances to get younger, ascending players for a similar price or a better deal, then yeah, you're saying this is a window that we feel like we have a chance to win it all, and so we're going for it. So that's what I think it is, Chase. Whether it's look, it worked with Tampa. They saw the window. They did it with Brady, Antonio Brown, Gronk. Like, bring them together. It worked. It typically does not, but that's what working, I think, looks like to me.
That was Tim Hasselbeck today saying if you make the move for Julio, you are legitimately going for the Super Bowl, which I will appreciate. This is the one thing that I told people about like the last couple of years. I'm okay with saying, hey, we're pushing our chips in the center of the pile. If when it doesn't work out, you're willing to raise your hand and say, hey, guys, we tried to win a Super Bowl. It didn't work. And now we're bringing it back. Like, we're bringing it back. We've got to restructure. We got to get everything right. We got to let guys go. We got to rebuild. We got to, okay. When that moment comes where you're staring it in the mirror and it's time to rebuild, if you can admit we went for it, we liked our run, didn't work out, I think it's a lot easier as a fan to swallow that. I go back to me as a Titan fan growing up as a kid. I never thought about those things when I was younger. But like in 2004, we all thought the window was still open for the Titans after 4 playoffs in 5 years, a Super Bowl, best record in the NFL the next year, an AFC title game appearance, all kinds of things. But that next year, when they were bad, the year before they went and got Vince Young, they should have said, look, guys, we've had to cut Eddie George, Samari Rolle, Derek Mason, Kevin Carter, Javon Curse had to go in free agency, Brad Hopkins. I mean, like, all those guys were gone. Frank Wycheck retired. All those guys were gone. Like, it was over. And I'm okay with it if you can admit that. But people don't want to admit that because fans don't want to hear we're not going for it this year. They want to hear we're going for it every year. But it's probably one of my biggest beefs with the Predators right now, honestly, is that I look at it and I'm like, hey, like, you had a nice run. You had a good crack at it, but let's be realistic. 615-737-1025. We will get to your phones in just a second. I do want to say this, though. According to Sportsline, the new odds to acquire Julio Jones are out. The Titans are at the top at plus 200. New England plus 300. Seahawks plus 300. 49ers plus 500. Ravens plus 600. Raiders plus 700. Packers plus 900. Colts and Chargers rounded out. Let me say this. We heard take the Rams out today. Kimberly Martin reported that. They're not on this list. We also heard take the Ravens out, and they're still on the list. I would say, in this order, this is how I think it's going to play. These are the teams that I would say are most likely. Titans 1, Seattle 2, because Seattle's always going for it.
Yeah. There was
lengthy
There was a lengthy Athletic article put out today or yesterday about how Julio to the Seahawks just makes sense.
Raiders 3. And then I would argue, and this is tough because they're not even on this list, but I could see it. Well, I guess they're at the very bottom. Chargers. Because the Chargers, again, young quarterback, you're in Los Angeles. People in Los Angeles care about that star thing way more than I do. I don't care if Derrick Henry doesn't get on one single Wheaties box cover, and I couldn't care less. I like Sunday Night Football, and I think it's always a nice honor when you're on Sunday Night Football, but deep down inside, I couldn't care less. But, I mean, superstars are a big deal in Los Angeles, and adding Julio Jones to the Chargers, I think that gets more people into the gates. And I think the Chargers are really struggling with people caring about them in Los Angeles. Now, Herbert's helping. But again, I don't ever trust a young quarterback after 1 year. I got to see it again. So I could see the Chargers being a player for Julio.
Do you think the Patriots are still a player for Julio? Because that was a name that was really high on the list at the beginning of all of this entire saga, and now I feel like they're falling.
I think the Patriots are like the Cowboys, that they're on the list always to begin with. and then once there's no feasible way for them to be on the list, then they're off the list. So if a quarterback was out there and the Patriots hadn't re-signed Cam Newton and they hadn't drafted Mac Jones, then the Patriots would be the talk about every quarterback. It's like Indianapolis. If Carson Wentz hadn't been traded to Indianapolis, then I think every day we'd be hearing talk about Aaron Rodgers to Indianapolis.
Yes.
And
we were even talking about it.
I'm just glad that Aaron's not going to Indianapolis. But I think that the Cowboys and the Patriots are those kind of teams that they're always in the mix for every superstar until it's not feasible for that guy to go there. It's not feasible whatsoever. What do we have in the text line? Phone line's driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com on another Julio day. What do we have in the text line, Caroline?
One texter texted in and said Hasselbeck then said he would go to the Seahawks. What about DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett?
So I think that the point Hasselbeck made, and I think this is probably a good point, is Russell Wilson is a complainer. You know, he's not as much of a complainer as Aaron Rodgers. He's not as passive-aggressive as Aaron Rodgers. But I also think that his threats maybe feel a little bit emptier than Tom Brady's. Where Brady...
A little softer?
Yeah. Like, Brady reworked his deal to have the last 2 years void so he could be a free agent and they weren't allowed to tag him. That's a pretty big step. That's like moving out of the house.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, I think you're getting divorced. Like, I'm going to move out of the house for a little bit.
Just a little bit. Test the waters.
Sounds like you're getting divorced. I don't think Russell's willing to go there. Now, again, Russell is kind of in the same predicament Aaron is, where they gave Russell all this money. So it's like, okay, Russell, like you got all this money. Now, do you want to give it back or do you want to play football? But the rift between Russell and the Seahawks feels real. And I think that maybe Seattle, Pete Carroll, the way that he treats that team is probably a little different than the way Green Bay's run. And I wonder if they do think, okay, if we get Julio with DK, with Tyler Lockett, it'll hush Russ up. I don't think it'll win because you add Julio, but it would hush Russ up.
That's hard to say.
I mean, I wouldn't do it, but I do think that is kind of the direction. It feels to me like that's the direction that Seattle would go if they did it. The other thing with Seattle is they do everything, right? Like every player that's out there, they go after them. Every time a big-name player is on the market, we have talks on this show about, are they going to go after Clowney? Are they going to go after Odell Beckham? Are they going to go after Le'Veon Bell? Are they going to go after Antonio Brown? Are they going to go after J.J. Watt? Are they going to go after Tom Brady? We've had all those talks. Seattle's the one team that feels like goes after all those guys all the time. It's like, oh, like Kansas City is the team that if you've been arrested, they go after you. Seattle's the team that if you're a big name, and they'll go after you. If you're disgruntled, the Rams go after you. Like that's the Matthew Stafford wanted out of Detroit, he's with the Rams. Jalen Ramsey wanted out of Jacksonville, he's with the Rams. So everybody's got their MO. The Titans take the guy who is no longer worth the big money. Clowney not worth the big money, take him. DeMarco Murray not worth that big contract, take him. Tannehill not worth that starting money in Miami, take him. That's how the Titans operate. This is a little bit different.
A little bit different. Michael in Madison also texted in and said, how would you feel about trading for Julio, hypothetically, if the Titans had never signed Jadeveon Clowney?
I'm not going to let the Clowney thing affect the Julio thing. I mean, I think it affects you money-wise because it's $12 million you don't have this year.
Yes,
but
if you had that $12 million.
I told you, I just don't operate under it didn't work out last year with Clowney, so it's not going to work out this year with Julio mentality. I don't operate like that.
And it's also not fair to say, well, if the Titans had never signed Jadeveon Clowney, then of course the Titans would go for Julio. I don't think it's fair to say that.
No,
either.
I don't. But I do think it's fair to say Jonnu Smith is still here if they didn't sign Clowney.
Yes,
that I feel pretty comfortable with, and I feel comfortable with it because Floyd brought it up before it happened, and that's one of those things where he was like, "Hey, it's either 4 or 5 years of Jonnu Smith, or it's Clowney this year," and they took Clowney that year. And if he was thinking it, and he was thinking it and willing to tell all of you, then I'm telling you they thought about it too, and they were willing to roll that dice. But again, I am not in the business of saying, Well, it didn't work out when we drafted Vince Young, so let's not draft Jake Locker. Let's not draft Mariota, because I got a lot of those calls before they drafted Mariota, and I just thought, nah, it's crazy. It's ridiculous. It's just, nothing. Oh, man, basketball. Oh, basketball did me in last night on Caroline's. Well,
Rally the Valley, baby. Go Suns. I mean, they got smoked. The Lakers got smoked.
Yo, LeBron sucked last night. I mean, I got to tell you, LeBron.
AD-less LeBron.
Did you hear Charles Barkley called AD?
Yes, street clothes.
Street clothes?
Yeah.
Street clothes.
Because he's always hurt.
The best part was he
Davis.
said that, and then you hear Shaq in the background go, "You ain't got to explain it, Chuck." And I just laughed so hard at that because it's like real recognize real.
Right.
And, Shaq is like basically, to me, that's Shaq. Like, it's bigger that Shaq call AD out than it is that Chuck, because Shaq's a Laker. And so it's like, hey, you ain't got to go there, Chuck. You ain't got to explain it, Chuck. Like, hey, like, I hear you, Chuck. Everybody understands.
Right.
I definitely, LeBron, boy, he let me. Mikal Bridges, who I've never heard of in my life, shows you how much of a basketball guy I am. LeBron, this guy is like 5 inches shorter and 100 pounds lighter than LeBron James. And LeBron's got him posted up. And I'm sitting there watching the game. I couldn't give a flying you-know-what about LeBron James or about the NBA in general, but I've bet the game, so now I'm interested.
But when a savaging of a beer is involved, then the stakes are high.
LeBron has the ball in the post and passes out for a shot clock violation. And I'm like, you know what? Take him out of Space Jam.
It's like your ultimate end-all be-all is
take him out of Space
you
Jam.
don't deserve to be in Space Jam anymore.
Michael Jordan.
You're a disgrace jam.
Michael Jordan would never have let a guy 5 inches shorter than him and 100 pounds lighter than him force him to pass it out of the post. Never. So I lost that bet last night.
So are you on the MJ side of the MJ versus LeBron GOAT debate?
I hate that debate. Caroline's is next. Stillman Company. It's ESPN 102.5 The Game. Damian Lillard, have a night, kid. I mean, he almost evened up Caroline's last night.
It was Dame time last night.
Denver -2, double overtime. Caroline gets it. I had Portland money line because of Damian Lillard. I guess I just didn't factor in that the rest of the team sucked, which they did. But we start the fourth and final week of the month. Yours truly is up 2-1, which means if I win this week, then Caroline has to savage a beer at the next Nashville SC Nashville Sounds game or Preds game or whenever the first person will let her get on a Jumbotron and savage.
Whoever will have me.
Tomorrow at First Horizon Park for the Folds of Honor charity softball game, that would have been a great time for you to savage that beer. But
I will not savage a beer at a charity softball game.
Why not? It's for money. You want to savage for the kids?
I'll STK. Savage for the kids.
Okay. So this week, yours truly is down after, again, this is going to be a light week this week because we have one less day. But yours truly, and again, I look at this through my lens, 2-2. Caroline Fenton, 3-1. So it's time now for Caroline's.
Get in on the action. Put the money on the mahogany. What's on tap on the sports books? It's time to break it all down with Caroline's. Here on Stillman Company.
On ESPN.
102.5 The Game and the Game Nashville app.
Well, the Montreal-Toronto series is finally over, so we can finally move on to the next round with Winnipeg and Montreal. I'm going to take the Jets money line -154. Now, I don't want to discredit anything that Montreal did because what a series that they had with Toronto. Came back, falling back 3 games, and took Game 7 on the road. But Montreal is coming off of virtually no rest, while Winnipeg put the nail in Edmonton's coffin in just 4. So, Winnipeg is a much more rested team. The Jets in the regular season were 6-3 against Montreal, and they're averaging about 3.5 goals per game in their first round series, allowing just 2. I think that the Jets are just the better team, so I'm going to take the Jets money line -154.
Game is in Winnipeg. I don't feel comfortable with either team because I don't think either team's that good. Going into the season, like for example, Montreal was 24-21-11 this year. Montreal's an average team with Carey Price at goal, he's old now. I'm going to take Montreal on the money line here, though I don't feel good about it. When I took Montreal on the money line last week, and you were like, I can't believe you would take Montreal over Toronto on the money line, it's because I knew that bad things happen to Toronto in the playoffs. Bad things don't necessarily happen to the Jets, but I'm going to go with the better goaltender here. I think Price over time has been a better goaltender than Connor Hellebuck. And I think it's funny. These two teams, Winnipeg and Montreal, are only in this spot because the two biggest chokers in the National Hockey League, Edmonton and Toronto, both just vomited all over themselves in the first round of the playoffs. I'm going to go with Montreal on the money line here. But really, I think it's like a flip of the coin. I don't think either team's very good.
We've also got the Western Conference Finals tonight with the Jazz in the Grizz. I'm going to take the Jazz money line, which
is the finals.
Horrendous odds. What?
That's the first round.
Yeah.
You said Western Conference Finals?
The first round of the Western Conference Finals. Or the Western, yeah.
What?
It's the first round.
Right. You said the finals?
First round of the Western Conference.
Okay. All right. Yeah. I was like, what? I was like, wow, we're in the finals.
Anyways, I'm going to take the Jazz money line, which is horrendous odds, -460. So I'm also going to take the over 226, -110. In each of the 4 games in the Jazz and the Grizz, they've all hit the over. So it's going to be very, very high-powered offense.
What's the over?
226. Utah has 122 points-ish per game. Memphis has about 116 per game in this series, so feel good about that. The Grizzlies have dropped 3 straight while losing by more than 7 or more points in the past 3 games. The Grizzlies took that first game, but I think that they're just very outmatched here with the Jazz. So I'm going to take Jazz money line, but really best odds here with the over.
I'm going to take the Jazz on the money line too because I think that Memphis is kind of maxed out for where they are this year. Although, again, get Ja a partner and Memphis might have something. But I'll take the under just to be different here. The one thing about a game like this, 3-1 lead, Utah jumps out to a big lead at home, and then all of a sudden, both teams kind of pack it in. And then it's kind of like a celebratory handshake. So
right.
I'm going to take the under here just off the pack-it-in factor.
We've also got Astros Red Sox.
Red Sox are struggling.
Red Sox have been struggling as of late, so I'm going to take the Houston Asterisks on the money line, -145. Astros have Framber Valdez. He's a lefty out on the mound today. He had a season debut on Friday. He was out for 2 months after spring training after fracturing a finger. On Friday, he had 72 pitches, went 4 innings, allowed 1 run, 2 hits, and 2 walks. So pretty good season debut outing for him. He has a 1.88 ERA in the playoffs last year. So just based off of what he had done the year before, he's been pretty lights out. Red Sox have Nick Pivetta on the mound. He has a 6-0 record in 10 starts with a 3.86 ERA. Astros are up 2-0 in this series, and I think it's going to be a sweep. I think it's going to be a trash can sweep. Nick Pivetta has a 4.82 ERA in the month of May, and he has yet to go further than 6 innings. And the Red Sox don't have the deepest of bullpens.
A baseball, to me, is always a market-correcting sport. So the Red Sox have not been very good lately. I'm going to take the Red Sox on the money line.
All right.
I think Pivetta has probably been their best pitcher this year. I'm going to take the Red Sox on the money line just because I feel like they're not going to let this swoon be too long. But certainly the Red Sox have come down to earth after being red hot.
No pun intended.
No. I am taking the Atlanta Hawks today, +1 at the Knicks. Game 5, chance to close it out. I think the Knicks, when people told me, and you know me, I don't keep up with the NBA on a daily basis. When people told me that the Knicks were good this year.
Oh, Knicks were great.
I was very skeptical of that because I don't know any of the players on the team. I mean, I know that they played in college. Like I know
Derrick Rose, Julius Randle.
Right. I know who those players are, but they're not like NBA stars to me. Like I watched Phoenix and Chris Paul, Devin Booker, LeBron James, Anthony Davis. Like I know those guys.
Right.
As NBA stars. Atlanta's got one. And Trae Young, I think this is a big step for him. I think that the Knicks are just kind of are what they are. Give me the Hawks +1.
Give me the Knicks -1.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of the same as money line at this point.
Yes, I mean, it's the same thing. But you have better odds. So Knicks -1, -112. Hawks +1, -108. Hawks on the money line +100. So.
I'm going to go with the Hawks +1 here.
Yeah.
That's going to do it for us. We are out of here. Again, tomorrow we'll be live at First Tennessee Park, the Folds of Honor charity softball game. Yours truly, Terry Bradshaw, will be there throwing out the first pitch. Yours truly will be participating on one of the teams. I have no idea. I could literally be batting behind A.J. Brown tomorrow. I have no idea. That's it for us, Preds Insiders. Robbie Stanley.